The story begins as we see a boy being mocked for his weak magic, and a noble declares that magic will never favor someone like him. The noble decides to show him a real spell, burning him alive, but he admires the beauty of the noble's magic, and he wishes he could have another chance to learn it. He suddenly wakes up in a room full of maids, but he thinks they're giants, so he tries to defend himself, shooting a fireball that blows a hole through the roof. The city celebrates the birth of the 7th Prince Lloyd, but the maids can't believe what he just did. 6 years later, we see the maids searching for Lloyd, and they decide to check another area. He comes out of hiding, but he's seen by 2 nobles, so he tells them not to alert the maids, and they agree to this, inviting him to join their hunt, but Lloyd runs away. One of them wonders why his companion wants to win Lloyd's favor, since he's the 7th son, so he's unlikely to become the king. But the noble recalls how Lloyd read magic books when he was a baby, so he believes Lloyd is the reincarnation of the great William Bordeaux, the father of magic. Lloyd overhears this, and he notes that he really reincarnated, but he was just a peasant in his previous life. He goes to the library, since he only cares about magic, so he wants to learn as much as he can. He picks up one of the books, but his maid Silpha suddenly takes it from him, and he realizes he's been discovered. They start training together, but Lloyd thinks he doesn't need to learn swordsmanship, since he isn't competing for the throne. But Silpha explains that he still needs to learn it as a member of the royal family, and she declares that his education is her life mission. Lloyd realizes that she'll force him to fight until evening if he slacks off, so he decides to get it over with. They keep fighting, and Silpha notes that he's getting stronger. Lloyd knows she always holds back, but now he's using a control magic to copy her movements, so he's basically cheating. He continues fighting, but he realizes that he's still at a disadvantage, because she's far stronger than him. So he uses physical enhancement magic to bridge the gap, and he also uses levitation. He continues the battle, and Silpha notes that he's stronger than before. He decides to turn off the control spell to surprise her, and prepares to deliver the finishing blow, but she blocks his attack, saying she knows he's cheating, and immediately defeats him. She reveals that she was able to notice the difference after he used his magic, but she's actually happy to see how talented he is, and she's proud that he can use 2 spells at once, because even Imperial mages struggled to do it. But he notes that he was actually using 4 spells, and is relieved that she didn't discover the physical enhancement and control magic. Later that day, Lloyd hears about a forbidden library, which has a demon named Grimoire sealed in a book because it almost destroyed an entire empire. He manages to find the library, and he uses concealment magic to hide himself. He approaches the entrance, and one of the guards is sleepy, so the other one tells him to stay alert, since there's a powerful demon inside, and the library's magic could shake the entire kingdom. Lloyd walks past them, but the guards mention that no one will be able to access the library, since 10 of the most powerful mages created an unbreakable seal. But Lloyd easily breaks it, and he enters the library, saying he had no idea that such an interesting section existed in the castle. He begins to study the books, but one of them suddenly starts levitating, and the demon Grimoire appears, saying he's impressed that a boy was able to break the barrier. He explains that he's sealed, and he asks Lloyd to help him escape, saying the seal is wearing off, so it's only a matter of time before he breaks out. He offers to give gold in exchange for Lloyd's help, but he realizes that the gold is actually a creation magic and it's of low quality. So he explains that he'll put the seal back after he finishes reading, saying his study depends on the kingdom, so he wants to preserve it. Grimoire is worried, so he tries to convince Lloyd that he won't do anything to harm the humans, but Lloyd knows he can't be trusted. But he talks about magic, saying he can teach Lloyd about spells lost centuries ago. So Lloyd closes his book, and he's captivated by the idea, so he creates a magic key, and manages to break the seal. Grimoire is freed, and Lloyd asks him to use an ancient spell, so he tries to kill Lloyd with a spell called Arctis Obscura, and the room is destroyed by its power. He wonders what he's going to do now that he's free, but we see that Lloyd survived, because he was protected by a barrier. He's impressed by the ancient magic, realizing that it's nothing like the other spells he encountered. He asks for more, and Grimoire keeps using his spell, thinking Lloyd is underestimating him, but it doesn't penetrate the barrier, as Lloyd analyzes the spell. He wonders what it's like to be hit by that kind of magic, so he touches it with his finger, realizing it's painful, but also beautiful, and he wonders what else Grimoire has to show him. He becomes furious, so he grows another head and recites 2 spells at the same time, combining them to launch a powerful attack. But Lloyd continues analyzing, and he notes that casting 2 spells at the same time is usually impossible. But demons can grow another mouth, so they're capable of using more advanced magic. Grimoire can't believe his strongest spell didn't work, and Lloyd is excited, thinking learning it must be fun. Grimoire tries to escape, but he realizes that he's trapped inside, so he wonders how many barriers Lloyd can make. Lloyd explains that they're under the castle, and he decided to take precautions so his magic doesn't get out of control like before, and we see that the entire library is protected. He mentions that he wants to see Grimoire's defense magic, and he launches a fireball at Grimoire, burning him to a crisp, but Lloyd wonders why he didn't defend himself. Lloyd uses his magic to fix the library, and Grimoire is impressed with his magic, recognizing him as his master. But Lloyd thinks Grimoire is amazing, since demons can't die from magic. He wonders how much pain a demon can endure, and this terrifies Grimoire, so he swears his loyalty to Lloyd as his familiar. He agrees to this, but thinks Grimoire needs to change his appearance, so he transforms into a cuter version of himself, planning to attack Lloyd when he lets his guard down. He asks Grimoire to hide in his clothes, and Grimoire thinks he's a fool because he can control Lloyd's mind if he gets too close. But as he touches Lloyd, he realizes that Lloyd's mana is too dense, so he can't do anything against him. Grimoire thinks it's better to be obedient for now, so he tells Lloyd to call him Grim, and he ends up becoming Lloyd's familiar. We see the second Prince Albert getting ready, and he goes to visit Lloyd, so Grim hides from him. They head to the training field, where Albert uses his magic to hit targets, and Lloyd tells Grim that Albert is strong and smart, so the nobles think he's going to be the next king. He also has permission to go to all areas of the castle, and he invited Lloyd to join him, so this is one of the rare chances where he can use magic in front of others. Albert tells him it's his turn, but he thinks he shouldn't draw too much attention, because he doesn't want to be dragged into the succession dispute. So he decides to just graze the targets, and the nobles aren't impressed, thinking he's nothing special. But Grim thinks they're fools, since they didn't notice that the targets were hit in the same way, which is much harder than just hitting. Lloyd is thinking about how rotation makes the trajectory more stable, so Grim thinks he's a magic maniac. Albert seems to notice something, so he decides to take a break and leaves Lloyd alone, but he can't believe how lucky he is, because now he has an empty shooting gallery to train in. He mentions that he wants to test new tricks, like the dual enchantment that Grim showed him. But Grim thinks this is impossible, since it's exclusive to demons, but Lloyd doesn't see the problem, and he absorbs Grim, who starts screaming, asking him who would assimilate a demon into their body, but Lloyd is just happy that it worked. The two start reciting together, but Grim gets overwhelmed and freaks out, wondering what Lloyd was doing. So he explains that it was a spell stack, saying he was shortening enchantments by mixing the chance of multiple spells, which allows him to reduce the enchantment time. He reveals he was trying to stack 100 enchantments, but Grim can't believe this, since a spell stack should only have 2 or 3 spells at a time. Lloyd tries something else, and he manages to speak through Grim's mouth. So he decides to use 2 advanced spells at the same time, casting a water and a fire spell, but Grim can't believe he's trying to merge 2 different types of magic. Lloyd feels the power flowing through his body, and thinks he shouldn't point this at anything, so he launches the magic into the skies. Albert is having tea, and the ministers wonder why he pays so much attention to Lloyd, because he's just a child. But Albert thinks they don't have an eye for talent, and he explains that Lloyd hit the targets in the same way, thinking he did it on purpose. Albert tells them he's a prodigy who will become a great sage one day, so he's a valuable asset to the kingdom, and the ministers praise Albert for his insight. He wonders if Lloyd hit all the targets, but the ministers think it's too early, and they realize that the sky is dark. We see the field destroyed, and Grim is terrified because Lloyd opened a hole in the sky. He's enchanted by the magic, but he panics as he sees the hole, wondering how he's supposed to get rid of it, but it disappears after a while. The next day, Grim sees the hole in the newspaper, but Lloyd is more interested in a party of adventurers who cleared a rank A dungeon. He thinks this is a chance to bring back magical items, so he decides to go to a dungeon, but Grim mentions that he can't, reminding him that everyone will notice if he leaves. But he thinks he can handle it, and uses a pellet to create a clone of himself. Grim realizes the clone is identical to Lloyd, so he should be able to leave, but he knows this isn't enough to fool Silpha, so he explains that he has a plan. We see Lloyd leading the castle, and he talks to Grim from a distance, wondering how he is, so Grim reveals that he's trying to imitate Lloyd. He remembers how Lloyd put his mind into the clone, and his body into Lloyd's hand, finding Lloyd truly impressive. He asks Grim to deceive Silpha while he goes to the dungeon, but Grim realizes he can do whatever he wants with Lloyd away. But Lloyd mentions that he's glad to have Grim as his familiar, and this seems to touch Grim, so he tells Lloyd to return soon. He wonders how to find a dungeon, and he sees a girl running from a group of orcs, but she suddenly attacks them, taking them down. Lloyd realizes she did this thanks to her breathing, and he read that in foreign countries, the fighters use breathing to channel an energy called ki, which allows them to use incredible techniques. The girl notices Lloyd spying on her, so he decides to introduce himself, but Grim reminds him that he can't be discovered as the seventh prince. Lloyd realizes he's right, but the girl is already running towards him, and she prepares to fight him, but we see that he changed his appearance, introducing himself as Robert. We learn that he used an illusion spell, but it can only transform him into people he has already met, so he used the double incantation to merge his appearance with Albert's. She introduces herself as Tao, a Class B adventurer, and she can't believe how handsome he is. She thinks that after 18 years of training, she has finally met someone she wants to be with, so she decides to make him her boyfriend. Lloyd explains that he was just looking for a dungeon, so she immediately offers to help him. They reach a dungeon, and Tao defeats all the monsters for him, wondering if he's impressed by her strength, but he's more interested in the shiny stones at the dungeon. They decide to take a break to eat, and Lloyd asks her about ki, so she's surprised that he knows about it, because it isn't well known on this continent. She explains that ki circulates through breathing, which allows its user to gain supernatural powers. She mentions that it requires a lot of practice, and she suddenly notices that he's practicing, but he feels pain in his lungs. She asks him what he's doing, so he explains that he just tried to copy what she did. She's worried, since it seems like his lungs are on fire, but he ignores her and tries again, since he felt an energy different from mana. He thinks he can use this to improve his magic, and Tao realizes he's really interested, so she decides to teach him about ki. She's struck by his beauty, and she tells him to maintain his breathing until they leave the dungeon. We return to Grim, who thinks Lloyd is weird for having a good life in the castle and not caring about it. But Silpha suddenly appears behind him, so he becomes worried. Tao keeps defeating the monsters, and she explains that she killed the dungeon boss using a ki burst. They're about to collect the reward, but she thinks they won't find good treasure inside the chest, because the dungeon is too easy. Lloyd is fascinated by the treasure chest, and Tao notes that he's already used to the breathing, thinking he's so good that even her grandfather would approve of him as her fiancé. They decide to open the chest, but something suddenly attacks them, so Lloyd saves her, as a lich appears. Lloyd wonders what a lich is, but she assures him that he doesn't need to worry, so he should just leave the dungeon while she deals with it. He explains that he wants to see the battle, but she suddenly attacks him, sending him flying, because she wants to save his life. The lich attacks her, but she dodges, wondering what a lich is doing in a low-level dungeon, because even elite adventurers struggle to defeat it. She hopes to buy enough time for Lloyd to escape, while he continues flying, thinking there's still much he needs to learn. He uses his barrier to help him recover, wondering if she'll be okay, and he asks what Grim thinks, but he's acting strange, begging him to return to the castle. Meanwhile, Tao is holding off the lich, but thinks she's going to die. The lich notices she's using ki, and mentions that he defeated someone who used this technique before, but thinks it's nothing more than a cheap form of magic. He reveals that he eats the souls of adventurers who challenge the dungeon, and this allows him to steal their abilities, but he thinks she isn't worth devouring. He wonders if Lloyd is more capable than her, since he managed to dodge the surprise attack. Tao realizes that both Lloyd and the lich are after knowledge, but they're the complete opposite of each other, because Lloyd finds even the smallest things interesting. She's happy that Lloyd finds ki impressive, and he's different from other people in this country, who treat ki as a cheap technique. The lich thinks she's talking nonsense, but Tao suddenly attacks him, so he protects himself with a barrier. But she keeps attacking, saying she's been training her ki since she was a child, and she gave up everything for martial arts, so she never had a boyfriend. She manages to break the Lich's barrier and uses all of her strength to attack him with a burst of ki. But she becomes exhausted, unable to move her body, and she discovers that the Lich was able to dodge. He tells her she's too weak to defeat him and mentions that she wasted her life. He casts his spell, shattering the ground, but it suddenly starts to break, and we see Lloyd protecting her with his barrier, asking her to let him take over because he's in a hurry. The Lich starts casting a spell, but Lloyd suddenly appears behind him, so he wonders how Lloyd used magic without reciting an enchantment. Tao realizes he's using ki, and the Lich begins attacking him, but he focuses on using ki and magic. He continues practicing his techniques while the Lich attacks him, but he realizes that his barrier is preventing him from getting air. So he dispels the barrier, but the Lich thinks he was able to destroy it. He launches a combined attack, but Lloyd uses his ki to dodge it, and he finally manages to merge mana and ki, using it to stop the Lich's attacks, but he thinks it isn't strong enough. He focuses on ki, attacking the Lich with ki bursts, and the Lich wonders how he's able to attack without enchantment, wondering if a ki technique can be so powerful. Lloyd is able to improve his technique, and he manages to defeat the Lich by cutting him in half, so Tao thinks he's amazing. They collect the dungeon's reward, and Tao is disappointed, but Lloyd asks to keep it, since the knife seems to have an enchantment. The dungeon suddenly begins to collapse, as Tao explains that this happens after the treasure is taken. Lloyd thinks the chest is actually the core of the dungeon, and explains that it stays underground until someone drops a magic item. So it absorbs the object, and creates a dungeon around it to gather more magical items from adventurers. He thinks this is a great opportunity, but Tao thinks they should leave quickly, and he finally manages to pull out the chest, but they almost get crushed to death. Tao is impressed with him, but asks him why he didn't use magic, and she thinks he was protecting her honor. But Lloyd explains that it seemed fun, and he realizes he needs to return, so he starts flying. She reveals that he used a secret technique called Ki Blade, and she notes that she isn't strong enough to use it, so she promises to improve. He starts flying away, and she wants to be good enough for him, but she realizes that she may never see him again. Lloyd returns to the castle, and he finds Grim beaten on the floor. He's traumatized by Silpha, and we learn that she gave him a beating during their sparring match, thinking Lloyd is getting weaker. So he cries, asking Lloyd why he didn't return earlier, and Grim is annoyed that he suffered for Lloyd to get a worthless knife, but Lloyd assures him it's a real treasure. He places it in hot water and scrapes its surface, explaining that it was treated with mana essence, which is a catalyst for enchantments, and he realizes that it was enchanted with boost power. Grim wonders if he'll be able to create enchantments, but he explains that this is a difficult technique to learn, and the essence is lost along with the weapon if he fails. So he decides to analyze the essence to create one of his own, and he uses purification magic, and they discover the recipe for the mana essence. Lloyd realizes it's made of oil, silver, and hematite, but Grim thinks this is difficult to obtain since it's made with monster core. But Lloyd mentions that they already have the dungeon's core, so they just need silver and oil, and several weapons they can test enchantments on. Lloyd goes to the king to ask for silver coins, and his father gives him a bag full of them, so he leaves happily, but the king thinks his son is modest for only asking for silver coins. Lloyd and Grim melt the coins, and we see Lloyd fighting against Silpha. He's giving it his all, using the sprint spell to close the distance and transforming the ground to make her lose her balance. He prepares to hit her, but she disappears and ends up defeating him. She gives him the oil as part of their deal, but Lloyd reminds her that the deal was to get the oil only if he hit her. But she explains that she's happy now, because she was worried after his terrible performance yesterday, thinking he was just having a bad day. Lloyd runs off, and he starts mixing the ingredients for the enchantment. He asks Albert for weapons to test enchantments, since he's surrounded by guards, and he wonders if anyone would like to give a weapon to his little brother. But the guards don't want to give the weapons they bought to a child, since enchantment magic rarely works, but they have no choice, so they give up their weapons. Lloyd begins enchanting their weapons, and Grim is surprised that he's writing multiple layers of spells. But this causes the steel to break, because it can't handle the enchantments. Lloyd starts over, but the weapons keep breaking, and he spends all night doing this. He goes to Albert to show him the swords, but confesses that he only managed to enchant 50 out of 120 swords. Lloyd remembers that he was able to enchant more, but tried to put even more spells on them, so they ended up breaking. But Albert is impressed, since the best enchanters only have a 10% success rate, so he realizes that Lloyd is extremely talented. But one of the guards thinks he's lying, and he probably handed over the swords without any enchantment, but the guard's sword cuts through the sheath. Albert is impressed with one of the weapons, and Lloyd wants to see the swords in action. So Albert explains that the king ordered them to hunt a monster, saying he can join them. We see Silpha driving a carriage, and the princes are incited to hunt the monster. Lloyd is excited, since he doesn't leave the palace often, and he wants to see his swords in action. Silpha thanks Albert for letting her accompany them, and he explains that he doesn't want her to be worried about Lloyd. She thinks it's natural because she's Lloyd's teacher and guard, but Albert wonders if she has other feelings for him. So she draws her sword, and Albert fears for his safety, but she senses enemies nearby, and they're attacked by a group of kobolds, as the soldiers swear to defend Albert. Lloyd seems afraid, but Grimm knows that he was the first to notice them, and we learn that Tao taught him a key technique that allows him to sense everything around him. It's a basic key technique, but is extremely effective, and Grimm thinks he's getting scarier each day. He watches the fight, and the guards can't believe how sharp their weapons have become, because it's cutting through the kobolds like paper, so he realizes that the enchantment worked. Albert tells everyone that this is the power of his little brother, and Silpha also thinks he's incredible, as she stands atop a pile of kobolds, but he notes that he never enchanted her weapon. One of the kobolds tries to attack Lloyd, but Tao saves him, having run over as soon as she sensed a presence, and Lloyd is shocked to see her. She notices that he's using key breathing, so she thinks it must be Lloyd, realizing that he looks like Robert, so she becomes suspicious, but Silpha tells her to back off. The two start facing off, so Albert tries to prevent the fight and invites Tao to camp with them. They camp near a lake, as Albert introduces himself as the second prince of Salem, and Tao can't believe he's a prince. She thinks that he and Robert also look alike, but feels that Lloyd has a presence more similar to Robert's. So she starts looking for him, and Lloyd curses himself for using Ki, because he didn't think she would appear. Grimm thinks he can't stop, or it would look suspicious, so he decides to hide in the tent, but he finds Silpha changing clothes. He wonders why she's in his tent, and she tells him they'll sleep together, since she's the only one who can protect him. Lloyd doesn't think it's necessary, and tries to leave, but she stops him, because she doesn't want him to meet Tao. But she suddenly appears looking for Robert, so Silpha throws a knife at her. They go outside, while Silpha apologizes to Tao, explaining she sensed an idiot, so they start to argue, and Lloyd sneaks out. He finds Albert, who tells him he's breaking their hearts, and asks him to be careful, since women can be scary. Silpha and Tao realize the soldiers are watching them, so they beat them up. Tao explains that she was hired to restore an ancient temple, and Lloyd notices it's on top of the hill, but Silpha just tells her to leave. Albert stops her, saying it's dangerous to go alone, and he thinks her detection ability is useful, so he asks her to join them until dawn, but a wolf suddenly appears. They realize it's the monster they're looking for, a bearwolf, and the soldiers prepare to fight it, as Silpha protects Lloyd. He's excited to see the bearwolf, but notices that Grimm is looking at the temple, and it seems familiar to him. Tao also joins the fight, and Albert decides to join the battle, casting a spell amplified by the sword that Lloyd enchanted. He attacks the monster, killing it in one hit, so everyone praises Albert, but he knows that Lloyd's enchantments helped him defeat it. So he praises Lloyd, who notes that the extra enchantments on his sword worked. But Grimm recalls that there was a demon sealed in that temple, and the bearwolf rises again, as a group of monsters suddenly appears. Something comes out of its mouth, and it's a demon named Pazu, who tells them they will die for harming one of his minions. The monsters attack them, and Albert manages to strike one in the eye, but it quickly heals. Tao saves him, but the monsters keep regenerating, and they think the demon must be behind this. Grimm explains that Pazu is transmuting his mana to control the monsters, and he's injecting his mana into them, allowing them to regenerate, so the fight won't end unless they defeat him. But Lloyd is more interested in learning about mana transmutation, and Grimm tells him this isn't the time for that, because everyone's fighting for their lives. But Lloyd thinks they'll be fine, and he orders Grimm to teach him. Pazu admits that a few of them have talent, but most are only alive thanks to their weapons. But he thinks Lloyd is the worst, so he starts insulting him, and Silpha becomes angry. Tao senses her aura, as she asks Lloyd for permission to go, and he tells her to do whatever she wants. She stands before Pazu, and he wonders if she wants to serve him, but she explains that she's bothered by his bad smell, which is spoiling Lloyd's fresh air, so she decides to kill him. But he thinks they can't defeat his minions, because they'll continue to regenerate as long as he keeps channeling his mana into them, and demons have no shortage of mana. He thinks she's trembling, but she mentions that he has terrible breath, so he becomes furious, and he tries to attack her. But she manages to escape, and she slices off his legs, saying he won't be able to keep up with her. But he regenerates his legs, and the others realize that the monsters have become sluggish, so they think they have a chance if Silpha keeps damaging Pazu. Grimm is teaching Lloyd how to transmute his mana, but explains that it's a delicate process, thinking Pazu has a talent for it, since even demons struggle to use it. But Grimm discovers that Lloyd has already learned the technique, as he can shape the form and color of his mana. Pazu continues to struggle against Silpha, and she grabs one of the enchanted swords, revealing that she's proud to use one of Lloyd's swords. Pazu starts taunting her, and he runs around her, as he continues to insult Lloyd. So she becomes angry, and Pazu manages to eat her, but she cuts him from within, and manages to take off his head. She separates the demon from the beowulf, and everyone is scared seeing this, as she declares that she won't allow him to touch her master. Albert and Tao manage to defeat the last of the monsters, but Pazu starts laughing, as he releases an evil essence into the air. Albert commands the others to help Silpha, but he's caught by the essence, and even Silpha collapses because of it. Pazu is annoyed, as he broke the seal of the temple a century ago, and it took him a long time to create the minions they just cut down. He grows 2 pairs of wings, and throws Silpha into the lake, as Albert tries to get up to help her, but he realizes he's out of strength. Pazu explains that this is his miasma, thinking she has no chance against him, but she mocks him, telling him his breath stinks. So he becomes angry, and he attacks her, but Tao saves Silpha, and she doesn't seem affected by the miasma. But Silpha claims that she doesn't need help, telling Tao to protect Lloyd, but she ends up fainting. Pazu admits she's a good swordsman, but he wonders why Tao isn't affected by the miasma. She attacks him, but he grabs her with his tail, and he hits her, wondering if she can withstand his miasma because of her breathing technique, but her breathing was interrupted by the blow. He wonders why she didn't flee when she had the chance, thinking she must want to be his minion, but she hits him as she becomes furious. She explains that she would never abandon a handsome man in need, and she strikes him with a powerful ki burst. She tries to stabilize her breathing before he counterattacks, but a monster attacks her from behind, and she almost gets devoured. Pazu asks her about the handsome man she mentioned, saying he can only see rubbish lying on the ground, and he thinks the only handsome ones are his minions, who always keep rising. He releases his miasma again, and this time it affects her. He asks her if she wants to devote her life to him, but she mentions that she can feel Robert's presence, and it has been giving her courage all this time. Pazu wonders who she's talking about, so she tells him that the greatest hottie of all time is coming to defeat him. But the monster eats her, and Pazu thinks humans are pathetic. He pulls Silpha out of the water, thinking it will take a while to bring her under his control, but her strength justifies the effort, and he brags that no one can resist his domination. Lloyd mentions that must be how he was able to control the bear wolves, and he confirms this, explaining that all he had to do was kill their parents and use his miasma to replace them in the minds of the pups. But Pazu realizes something is wrong, wondering why Lloyd is moving so casually in the miasma. He doesn't know how to respond, and Pazu notices that he's treating his essence as if it were nothing. He also notices Grimm next to him, knowing he's a demon, but Pazu wonders why he looks strange, calling him a disgrace. So he becomes angry, saying he was going to give Pazu tips out of respect for the Demon Brotherhood, but now he has changed his mind. Pazu orders the bear wolves to attack them, and Lloyd wants to use this chance to test his transmutation. He decides to create a flowery field using his mana, and the bear wolves remember the feeling of maternal love, so they side with Lloyd. He manages to remove Pazu's influence from them, and asks one of them to let his friend out, so the bear wolf releases Tao. Pazu can't believe Lloyd created such a large field using his mana, and realizes he's a great sorcerer. He tries to use his miasma on the bear wolves once more, but Grimm explains that it no longer works, because they now remember that he killed their parents. They launch a combined attack on Pazu, and this makes him drop Silpha. Lloyd is delighted to see how werewolves attack in packs, finding them much stronger than when they were puppets. But Paza manages to stop their attack and starts beating them, calling them ungrateful. He becomes furious and mentions that Lloyd is no match for him because no matter how many spells a sorcerer casts, he won't die. Lloyd has heard this before, and Grimm explains that demons have never been killed by magic. But Lloyd believes they're just hard to kill, so he wants to test how much magic it takes to end a demon's life. Pazu is terrified by Lloyd's mana, and Grimm knows that he's on another level, thinking Pazu doesn't stand a chance against him. He has a few spells in mind to test, and is excited to be able to do so without any restrictions. Pazu wonders why his mana is so dense, wondering if this is real, and he tries to capture Pazu, but he dodges the barrier. He realizes that Lloyd wants to put him in a cage to turn him into a test subject, and he runs off, as Lloyd keeps trying to capture him with barriers. Grimm wonders how many spells Lloyd can cast, and he explains he can do 20 spells at once, but he can use even more with Grimm's help. So he merges with Lloyd, and they create countless barriers with ridiculous speed. Paza goes into the water to escape, but the barriers keep coming, as he wonders how Lloyd can cast the spells so quickly. He comes out of the water, but is trapped by a spell called Dimensional Enclosure. He realizes that he can't escape, and Lloyd wonders why he's worried, because magic shouldn't work against him. He recalls that Paza murdered the werewolf's parents, and even performed experiments on them, so he can't complain about what Lloyd is going to do next. He uses his high-speed casting, so Paza becomes desperate and starts begging for his life. But Lloyd prepares to attack him with the 4 elements, and Paza freaks out, because he was never hit by this kind of magic before, so there's a chance he might die. Lloyd begins casting 240 spells per minute, and he decides to do this for 30 minutes, but he realizes that Paza stopped responding after 5 minutes. Grimm thinks it was due to the stress the multiple spells caused him, and Paza wonders how he failed so easily after a century of preparation. Albert and the others regain consciousness, so Lloyd tries to think of an excuse. He goes up to Albert, and Grimm tells Paza that humans don't want to follow leaders, saying they prefer to spend time with people who are just enjoying themselves, and thinks this is the reason why people keep flocking to Lloyd. Paza wonders if he lost because he wasn't having fun, and decides to entrust his ambition to Grimm, who eats his remains, increasing his mana. He watches Lloyd as he explains that Robert defeated the demon, and Grimm thinks that it will take more to beat him. They return to the city, and the king congratulates Albert for his success, asking him about the adventurers who helped him. So he explains that Robert left before they woke up, and Tao went after him, so the king becomes interested in his strength. But Albert mentions that Lloyd contributed the most to the hunt, as they only survived thanks to his weapons, so he asks the king to consider him as a successor. The king wonders why Albert wants another competitor, so he explains that he only wants what's best for the empire. The king accepts, and he asks Lloyd if he wants to be considered as a successor, but he humbly declines. Lloyd goes outside, and a werewolf wants to play with him. We learn that it followed him on the way back, and he notices how cute it is, but Grimm becomes jealous, so he changes his appearance, and Lloyd seems to like it. But Silpha arrives, so he hides Grimm and the werewolf. He tells Silpha that its name is Shiro, and he wants to teach him new tricks, but isn't sure how to do it. Silpha explains that monster tamers use their mana to teach amazing tricks, but Grimm thinks about how Lloyd gave up the throne and considers him a real magic maniac. Albert and the king watch him, and the king thinks he's modest, but Albert isn't sure if that's the case, and maybe the title of king is too small for him, so the king decides to keep an eye on him. Lloyd issues simple commands, and Shiro obeys him, but he reveals that Shiro is struggling to follow complex instructions, as he uses a command spell. But Shiro becomes confused, because he doesn't understand Lloyd's instructions. Lloyd realizes he needs to learn from a monster expert, and he thinks about his sister named Elise, who has tamed multiple monsters. So Lloyd decides to visit her, realizing that her tower is surrounded by friendly monsters, but she suddenly clings to him, saying she's glad to see him, and she even kisses him. Her maid Eris arrives, asking her why she kissed him, so she explains that she finds him cute, and she starts playing with Shiro, recognizing him as a werewolf. She mentions that she can connect with monsters through her instincts, but Silpha suggests leaving, thinking Elise can't teach Lloyd anything, because she doesn't seem to understand the concept of mana. But he asks her to show him one of her monsters, and a wolf suddenly appears behind him as she reveals that its name is Liru. Lloyd recognizes it as a high-class beowulf, and he can't believe it was able to approach him undetected, realizing that Elise was able to issue orders while she was talking to him. He thinks her orders must have been complex, because it approached him when he had his back turned, so he realizes that he can learn from her. He asks her to teach him how to talk to monsters, so she advises him to do it with love, saying it's the key to understanding monsters. But everyone thinks her advice doesn't make sense, and Eris thinks she can only do this because of her innate talent, but she claims that anyone can learn her skill. Lloyd believes her, and Silpha thinks he's starting to show interest in love, so she becomes excited, thinking he's growing into a man. He realizes that Silpha doesn't need to issue orders to the animals, because she's sharing her thoughts with them, revealing that he sensed mana flowing from her head. He decides to give this a try, sharing a mental image with Shiro, who suddenly starts running around him, before jumping up into the air. So Lloyd realizes that it worked, and Eris can't believe this, realizing he has already mastered the monster tamer's technique, but Elise thinks there's no trick involved, saying it's all about love. But he explains that love is just an important part of it, saying it's impossible to master the technique without a sense of empathy. He suddenly senses the animals approaching, and Elise clings to him, but she's still in sync with the animals, so they end up making a mess. After that, we see Lloyd riding Shiro, as he mentions that he can now connect with monsters. Silpha invites him to train with her, but Albert arrives, saying he needs to talk to Lloyd. So they start fighting over him, and he decides to go with Albert, who introduces him to the fourth Prince Dean. They head to a forge, where Dean reveals that he knows about Albert's enchanted sword, thinking Lloyd isn't capable of making it, so Dean decides to test him. Albert explains that Dean is a blacksmith, and he traveled to the nation of Bartram to pursue his passion, but he just tells Lloyd to start enchanting his sword. So he works on the weapon, as Dean notes that enchantment is considered as an advanced skill, and even the best enchanters in Bartram struggle to enhance a sword, so he doesn't believe Lloyd can do it. But he manages to enhance the weapon, and Dean can't believe it, realizing it's filled with advanced spells, so he realizes that Lloyd is the real deal. He looks forward to working with Lloyd, and he reveals that he wants to create the ultimate sword by making Lloyd enchant the steel while he's forging it. We learn that he tried to learn magic, but he didn't have the talent for it, so he wants to create a weapon that will allow everyone to cast spells just by swinging it. Lloyd agrees to help him because he wants to experience the production process, and they start working on the weapon as he asks Dean what kind of spell they'll be using. Dean wants to create a sword that shoots fire, but he knows that the fire spell has a complex casting formula, so the weapon won't be able to handle it. But Lloyd decides to give it a try, and the steel shatters, so he realizes that he needs to modify the formula. They decide to try again, but they keep failing, and Lloyd starts blaming himself, thinking there's something wrong with his method. But Dean reveals that he bought cheap mana essence, and Lloyd uses purification magic, realizing that it lacks hematite, so it isn't good enough for high-level enchantments. Silpha suggests going to a dungeon to gather hematite, and Lloyd can't believe she's saying this, because he isn't allowed to travel outside. But she reveals that the king gave him permission, thinking he needs to be exposed to the outside world. They head to the Adventurers Guild, where a girl named Katarina greets them, and she gives Lloyd a registration form. So he fills it up, as she explains that a crystal ball will measure his powers, saying it will determine his rank as an adventurer. We learn that Lloyd used it during his previous life, and he's afraid that it might explode if it tries to measure his full power. So he decides to suppress his mana, as he touches it, and it classifies him as an E-ranked adventurer. The other adventurers laugh at him, thinking he's pathetic, but Katarina realizes that his magic rating is incredible, thinking he's as powerful as an experienced sorcerer. But we learn that Lloyd was only using 1% of his total strength, so he was expecting the result to be lower. Katarina compares Lloyd to a legendary adventurer called the Silver Blader, who suddenly disappeared after clearing countless dungeons, but this makes the adventurers angry, thinking he's nothing compared to her. Silpha wants to accept a dungeon quest, but Katarina explains that they need at least one B-rank adventurer in the party, and one of the adventurers asks Silpha to go out with him. But she threatens him, and Katarina reveals that she's the Silver Blader, so the men are surprised, realizing they messed with the wrong person. But Katarina explains that Silpha has been demoted to the C rank, because she's been away for a long time. Tao suddenly arrives, saying she's willing to help them, and she reveals that she's now a rank A adventurer because she's been clearing dungeons as she searched for Robert. She asks Lloyd to introduce her to Albert in exchange for her help, and Katerina gives them a quest, as Lloyd realizes that Silpha was an amazing adventurer. But she reveals that she struggled against a certain group, which is known as the Assassin's Guild. They enter a dungeon, and they take the chest away so that Lloyd can use it to create the ultimate weapon. We return to Dean, as he waits for Lloyd to return, but Albert is starting to lose hope, revealing that they're on the verge of war, so they need the forge to create weapons for the soldiers. He thinks Lloyd won't make it back in time, so he tells Dean to put his research on hold, but Lloyd suddenly arrives with the chest. They're able to create the ultimate weapon, and Dean decides to try it, so he takes a swing, and it causes a massive explosion. But Lloyd realizes he overdid it, so he thinks about toning things down a bit. We see Lloyd resting in his room, as he reveals that he mass-produced the weapon for the soldiers, but he reduced the level of the enchantment, so the weapons just shoot regular fireballs. But he suddenly senses a strange presence, and we see a suspicious girl in the garden. He suddenly confronts her, and she tries to run, but finds she's trapped in his barrier. Lloyd wants to talk to her, but she reveals herself and unleashes a poison at him. Lloyd immediately purifies himself, but the girl tells him it's no use, because there's nothing that can purify her poison. Lloyd realizes it's because she's transmuting the nature of her poison with mana, and we learn that there are rare individuals who are born with a special type of mana called the Blighted. The girl introduces herself as Ren, the Poison Blighted, mentioning she has been spreading poison since her birth. She manages to break his barrier, but notes he will survive since he only took a light amount of her poison. She disappears, and Lloyd is impressed by her. Grim appears, wondering if he's okay, but thanks to his healing breath, he's able to recover faster than the poison's damage. Grim wonders why he didn't go after the girl since he's fine, but he reveals he wants her to lead him back to her hideout, mentioning the Assassin's Guild that Silpha told him about. We learn that there are 6 of them, and they each have special abilities, so Lloyd is excited to meet them. He manages to track Ren, so he heads off after her. We see Ren meeting up with the other members of her guild, and one of them is disappointed she got caught. She tells them about the mass production of swords, thinking it's a sign of war and a chance for them, but the man tells her to stop acting like Jade, saying that their leader is gone. Ren insists Jade will come back, but the woman mentions they are being watched, so Lloyd reveals himself. Ren is surprised since he should be poisoned, and the man recognizes him as the 7th prince. The group prepares to take him out since he knows too much, but Lloyd deactivates his barrier, causing Grim to freak out. He notes that since they are all unique, he wants to get a sample, as he uses his trace skill to copy Tao's technique. One of them suddenly attacks him, but he manages to defend himself thanks to using Tao's moves. The man introduces himself as Babylon, and he has a super flexible body. Lloyd is impressed he can use magic to increase his flexibility, but another man appears behind him, telling him to sink, as his body suddenly gets heavy. He's introduced as Crow, and he has the power of cursed speech. The third man prepares to attack, but Lloyd uses his strength enhancement to overcome the curse and dodge the attack. Lloyd lands on the man, but he reveals himself as Galilea the Spider. Lloyd seems to be stuck, but he gets free by getting out of his clothes. He admires all of their powers, but the woman suddenly attacks him, thinking he's strange for smiling in his situation. She suddenly stabs herself, and Lloyd takes damage, as she introduces herself as Talia, the 100 Pains, who can share her damage with anyone that she can see. Talia thinks he must be afraid, but he's just excited to experience new types of magic. He instantly heals his leg, and it also heals Talia, so he starts to wonder if his attacks on her will be reflected back to him. He's excited to test it out, and he uses his trace to copy Silpha's movements. Galilea is reminded of the Silver Blader, and they all freak out as Lloyd charges at them. He easily takes out Babylon, and Crow tries to blow him away, but it hits Galilea instead, and he crashes into Talia. Crow tries to command him to stop, but Lloyd is faster, and he takes him out. We see Galilea is stuck to Talia, and when he tries to attack, he tears her clothes. Lloyd takes this chance to attack her, but she tells him it's pointless, since the damage will just be reflected, but Lloyd still wants to try, so she thinks he's crazy. He blows her away, and he takes the same damage, but he's just happy to experience it. Galilea grabs onto his weapons to stop him, but he just lets go, and uses Tao's technique to blow him away. Rin is terrified seeing this, and Lloyd tells her to use her poison again, but Galilea mentions she can't control her poison mana, so everyone will be caught in it if she spreads her poison. Lloyd thinks about how they all seem to lack control of their powers, and Galilea notes that they wouldn't have had to turn to a life of crime if they could control it properly. He charges at Lloyd, but he disappears and attacks him from behind. Rin rushes to help him, but Lloyd puts his barrier back up, and Galilea tells her to stop, because he's okay, and his mana is actually under control, as Lloyd reveals he engraved a spell onto his body to help him control his power. Galilea cries, realizing his curse is finally over, and Lloyd helps the others as well. Crow is finally able to speak normally, and he's overwhelmed with emotion. The others are also happy, and Lloyd is welcomed into their group, as Galilea washes his clothes. Lloyd wants to see their powers again, but Galilea decides to tell him their backstory instead. Lloyd says he isn't interested in that, but Galilea continues to tell him anyway. However, when he mentions their leader Jade, who has the power of teleportation, Lloyd becomes interested. We learn his curse would cause him to teleport randomly, but he manages to get back to the group. He shows them a coin, declaring it as their emblem, and decides to form the Assassin's Guild. He notes that they will take the shady jobs that the Adventurers Guild can't handle, and they will leave a coin behind so people will know about them, hoping that people will know they are doing good, so that one day they can live in the light. Galilea notes that they heard the Lord of Lourdes was preparing for war, but that's when Jade disappeared. Lloyd wishes he could hear more about the ability instead of the backstory, but there's suddenly a teleportation circle, and a letter suddenly appears. We see Silpha breaking into the hideout, but it seems they are already gone. Shiro points to a note, and it seems they have gone to visit the Lord of Lourdes. Albert freaks out reading this, thinking their relationship with Lourdes isn't good, and he wonders why Lloyd is with the Assassin's Guild. He wonders if Lloyd was kidnapped, thinking they may need to go to war, but Dean tells him to calm down, thinking no one would be able to kidnap Lloyd. Albert thinks he needs to find a peaceful solution, but Silpha reveals Lloyd's clothes from the hideout, so they think he was stripped, wondering about the sticky white substance, so Albert declares for war. We return to the moment before they left the hideout, as Galilea reveals that the letter is from Jade, and he reads it to everyone, revealing that Jade is now the ruler of Lourdes. He invites them to his manor, and they're overjoyed to hear this, because they're looking forward to seeing him again. They decide to meet him, and Ren invites Lloyd to join them. But he explains that the letter is suspicious, because it was teleported to their hideout, reminding them that Jade can't control his powers. So they think it's a trap, thinking Jade must be lying to them, but Ren believes in him, saying he must have mastered his powers. Lloyd decides to join them, because he wants to see teleportation magic, but Ren is worried that he might get into trouble. So he assures her that everything is going to be okay, saying they'll be safe as long as they follow him. They fly to the manor, but they land in the middle of the forest, because Lloyd realizes that the group is struggling to keep up with him. So they decide to take a break, and Ren decides to hunt food for everyone. Babylon reveals that she grew up in the woods, and her poison ended up killing her parents when she was young, so she learned how to survive in the forest. Talia adds that Jade was the one who found her, and in a flashback, we see Jade welcoming Ren to the Assassin's Guild. He tells everyone about her power, so they think she's dangerous, but he assures them that everything's going to be fine. He cuddles her, saying she smells sweet, but he suddenly collapses, as Galilea mentions that it's difficult to keep her poison contained. But Jade still wants to be with her, saying he needs everyone's help to raise her, and they agree to this, saying they will do their part. They find a way to control her poison, and after some time, they create a magical robe, which keeps her poison contained. They welcome her into the group, and Jade gives her a hairpin, but she suddenly starts crying, realizing she has found a place to belong. Back in the present, Talia explains that Jade is like a brother to Ren, and Lloyd looks forward to meeting him. Ren prepares food for everyone, but they think it looks disgusting, so Babylon tells Crow to use his cursed speech to make it taste better, but she hits him, and he ends up collapsing. Talia reminds her that Lloyd is a prince, so she thinks he won't like the food, but she sees him enjoying it, and we learn that he was broke in his past life, so he's used to eating anything to survive. Everyone tries the food, realizing it tastes delicious, and they enjoy the meal together. In another flashback, we see Jade telling everyone that the Adventurers Guild is reconsidering the bounties on their heads, so they celebrate, thinking they'll be able to live normal lives. He admits that he isn't really homeless, and he's actually the third son of the Lord of Lourdes, who is addicted to war. He reveals that he needed allies to put an end to the war, and he admits that he manipulated everyone, but they don't care, telling him that he gave them hope. They think he wants them to assassinate his siblings, but he explains that he wants to settle things on his own, because he wants them to live normal lives, seeing them as his family. He isn't sure if he's going to make it back, so he tells them not to give up on their dreams while he's gone, saying he wants all of them to enjoy their lives in Lourdes. We return to the present, as Lloyd falls asleep, so Galilea carries him around, as Grimm reveals that a barrier is surrounding him, so there's no need to protect him. They're about to reach the manor, and Ren suggests allowing Lloyd to rest, thinking there could be trouble ahead. So they decide to leave him in the woods, as they investigate the manor, realizing that everyone's preparing for a party. A strange creature approaches them, recognizing them as the members of the Assassin's Guild, so he welcomes them to the manor, calling them honored guests. They start enjoying the party, as Jade appears, and he uses his teleportation to change his clothes, revealing that he can now control his powers. They're overjoyed to see him, but he explains that he doesn't care, as he suddenly orders them to bow down, and they're forced to obey, as they realize that he can use cursed speech. His companions turn into demons, and he tells them that his plan worked, revealing that their goal is to collect blighted bodies. Grimm fires an energy beam, but Jade appears behind him and blows him away. He crashes near Lloyd, causing him to wake up, and he realizes that his companions are gone. He sees Grimm struggling, so he asks Grimm what happened, and he tells Lloyd that their companions are in trouble. We return to Ren, as she asks Jade what's happening, and his minions reveal their true form, as Galilea notes that they're psychic life forms, which can control human bodies. Jade explains that they're from the Netherworld, and he reveals that he used his teleportation ability to bring them there. He reveals that he took control of Jade's body to acquire the ability, and he introduces himself as Gazama, the catastrophe from the Netherworld, explaining that he was able to dominate Jade's mind. Gazama reveals that the bodies of the blighted are ideal vessels for them, so Jade tried to take his own life to prevent Gazama from controlling his body. But Gazama healed his body as he was about to die, allowing him to take over. His minions want to steal Ren's body, but he warns them to be careful because her body is poisoned, and her friends fall into despair, thinking it's all over for them. But Gazama notices a mark on her, realizing it isn't in Jade's memories, so he uses his cursed speech to interrogate her, but she bites her tongue, as he realizes that she's trying to resist. He tells her to sell her friends out, but everyone suddenly senses a strange magical energy, as Lloyd summons a massive energy beam, which eliminates the demons, leaving an enormous crater in the ground. The remaining demons freak out, realizing that Lloyd is overpowered. He heals Ren, and tells everyone to escape, saying he will deal with the demons. She refuses to leave him, but Galilea carries her away, telling her they're no match for Gazama, so they need to leave everything to Lloyd. The demons think Gazama is dead, but he suddenly appears behind them, reminding them that they need to capture the assassins. So they chase after Ren and her friends, and Lloyd tries to blast them away, but they're able to escape. Gazama's minions charge in, as he summons a dragon, which slips past Lloyd's barrier, so he becomes curious, thinking about letting it hit him, but he doesn't know if he'll be able to survive. So he decides to dodge it, and it hits a demon, as Lloyd uses his analysis spell, realizing that the demon has been killed in one hit. Grimm advises him to run away, explaining that Gazama isn't using spells, because he's transmuting his mana to launch projectiles. We learn that barriers are made of mana, and it protects its user from spells, but mana can pass through it, so it won't protect him from Gazama's attacks. He realizes that Gazama is a worthy opponent, but he looks down on his minions, thinking they're useless. Grimm reveals that demons are broken down by classes, and Gazama's minions are at the 10th rank, so they can easily be defeated by humans. Pazu is 2 ranks above them, and Grimm is considered as a 3rd-class demon, but Gazama is far above them, and he's considered as a demon lord, which is beyond the level of a 1st-class demon. Grim thinks Lloyd is no match for him, but Lloyd confronts him anyway, and Kazama asks him who he is. So he explains that he's the 7th prince, and Kazama reveals that he was in Jade's memories, thinking Jade wanted to see him. He wants to get rid of Kazama because he's after the Assassin's Guild, and Lloyd believes in their potential, so he wants to protect them. But Kazama only sees them as perfect vessels for his kind, so they prepare to fight each other. Grim advises Lloyd to run away, but he refuses, and Grim thinks he's being stubborn, thinking he doesn't stand a chance, because Kazama has extreme magic resistance, so Lloyd won't be able to harm him. He fires a projectile, which pierces through Lloyd's barrier, so Grim freaks out, because even his strongest spells can't damage it. Kazama summons countless weapons, and he launches all of them, destroying everything around him, as Lloyd tries to evade, knowing his barrier won't hold. But Kazama suddenly appears above him, kicking him away, as he combines the power of his weapons, creating a powerful drill, which threatens to kill Lloyd. So he summons a stone golem, which protects him from damage, as the assassins watch the fight, realizing that it's on another level. Kazama's minions see them, so they charge in, as Babylon tries to open the gate, wanting to help his friends escape. Kazama notes that he was only able to pressure Lloyd with his teleportation ability, and Lloyd reminds him that it belongs to Jade. But he explains that he was able to master it, saying humans aren't strong enough to control their powers. So he believes that the Blighted are meant to be possessed by demons, because they're the only ones who can unleash the Blighted's full potential. He claims that he has become the perfect being by possessing Jade, telling Lloyd that he won't be able to defend against his next attack, as he teleports the weapons, stabbing Lloyd repeatedly. We cut to Kazama's minions, as they continue to charge in, but Galilea stops all of them, saying his webbing will harden after a few seconds. Crow orders them to fall, as Galilea notes that they're now able to control their powers thanks to Lloyd. Babylon opens the gate, but the demons are able to break free, as Galilea realizes that his webbing isn't strong enough. Talia stares at all of them, and she cuts her leg, causing them all to lose their footing. Crow asks her what she's doing, but she tells her friends to escape, because she hasn't fully mastered her ability yet, so she might end up harming them. But Ren refuses to leave her behind, as the demons regenerate, so she cripples them once again, and she tells her friends that she won't allow the demons to steal her body. Ren begs her to join them, but Galilea pushes her away, and closes the gate, as Talia wonders why he didn't escape with the others. So he explains that he will help her stop the demons, knowing they can destroy the gate to pursue the others. He's ready to sacrifice his life to save them, telling Talia to strike the finishing blow as he holds the demons in place. So she prepares to cut her neck, as the demons charge in, knowing she's about to kill all of them, but Galilea stops them, as Ren starts crying, thinking her friends are about to die. We return to Kazama, who reveals that he's disappointed, because Lloyd wasn't able to keep up with him. He prepares to kill the assassins, but Lloyd's body suddenly crumbles, and he launches a surprise attack, but Kazama teleports away. He realizes that Lloyd used a decoy, and he's now using his weapon, so Kazama thinks the fight is about to get interesting. But Lloyd notes that things aren't looking good, and Kazama thinks he's freaking out, but he tells Kazama that they need to fight somewhere else, so he becomes confused. Countless fireballs suddenly rain from the sky, setting the demons on fire, as everyone wonders what's happening. The gate is suddenly cut to pieces, and we see Albert with the royal army, realizing that things have taken an unexpected turn. Ren is happy to see him, and he leads his men against the demons, determined to rescue his brother. We see Sylpha training, as she cuts a magically reinforced post with a single hit, but her sword can't keep up with her strength, so she knows she needs to hold back, but she worries about facing another demon like Pazu. Back at the castle, Ren is glad to see they have help, but Albert decides to deal with them first. Sylpha threatens them, and asks them about Lloyd's whereabouts, so Galilea mentions he's fighting in the castle. Ren reveals he's fighting the demon boss, but Babylon stops her, reminding her that Lloyd told them to keep his strength a secret. Galilea wonders why he hides his power, so Lloyd mentions he just wants to focus on studying magic, and doesn't want any attention. So Ren wonders what they should say, and Sylpha tells them their time is running out. She decides to start with Ren, but Albert stops her, and the group thinks he's a more reasonable person, but he just tells Sylpha to start with one of the adults instead. They swear they're friends with Lloyd, but Albert takes out Lloyd's underwear, and he doesn't believe them. Galilea says it's just a misunderstanding, because Lloyd's clothes were left to dry after being covered with his fluid, but this just makes things worse. Rin tries to convince them, saying Lloyd is fighting to save their precious family member, and a demon suddenly attacks, but it gets eaten by Liro as Elise arrives. She decides to trust Rin, mentioning Liro would have eaten her if she sensed any bad intentions, so Albert decides to trust her as well. He prepares to face the demons, and he orders Silpha to find Lloyd, but Rin tries to stop her, saying Lloyd is just fighting a weakling, so he doesn't need any help. But there's suddenly magic in the sky, and the bridge is destroyed. Dean notes that the demons are swimming toward the riverbank, and Albert worries about becoming trapped, so he orders everyone to pull back. Meanwhile, we see Lloyd and Kazama watching from above, not wanting to be interrupted. They continue their fight, and Grimm tells Lloyd he needs to focus. He sees Albert and his soldiers fighting the demons, but he thinks they can handle it, so he decides to focus on Kazama. The demons regenerate despite the flames, and Dean uses his sword to cause a massive explosion, but it's still not enough to defeat them. He notes that their magic swords use up their mana, and their soldiers will run out before the demons stop regenerating. Albert notices that Silpha is missing, and we see her riding Shiro, telling him to jump, but it's way too far. Silpha thinks about using a rope, and Shiro also thinks about seeing Lloyd again, so he suddenly jumps, but just falls into the water. A demon suddenly attacks, but Silpha defends herself, and the demon compliments her, but reveals that while the other demons are at the 10th rank, he's higher level than them at the 8th, so he tells her she stands no chance. Meanwhile, Albert notes how the demons are possessing the bodies of Lordist citizens, and he wonders if there's any way to save them. A demon suddenly attacks from behind, but Babylon saves him just in time. Albert notes how he didn't hesitate to kill, and Babylon thinks he's a kind person, just like Jade, but mentions that the citizens are already dead, so there's no saving them. Hearing this, Albert activates his sword, and decides to stop holding back, activating a spell that rains fire from the sky. The demons burn, and Albert orders his men to fight with everything they have. Meanwhile, Silpha fights with the sword demon, and they seem to be evenly matched. They both charge at each other with their sword skills, causing a shockwave, but it ends up in a draw, with both of them taking a hit, but the demon just regenerates. He declares he wants to take her body, wanting to also use her sword skills, as he suddenly uses a Lordist technique, delivering an incredible slash. Galilea wonders how he knows such a technique, so the demon reveals it belonged to the owner of the body, showing his calloused hands and mentioning that the man must have trained incredibly hard. But all his memories and experience now belong to him. He can't wait to take Silpha's body, but she suddenly attacks him with his demon sword technique. He wonders how she can use it, so she mentions she just learned it by watching him, calling him weak for needing to steal a body to learn the man's technique. She decides to get serious, calling for Shiro, but the demon doesn't think he will help her win. But she searches through his fur and pulls out a sword. We see that it was Lloyd who made it for her, and he notes that he didn't put any flashy enchantments on it, but made it as strong as possible, so it will be able to withstand her full strength, thinking she will be able to kill demons with it. He notes how demons are psychic entities, and they're harmless until they create or possess a body, but if the body is killed, then the demon inside will also die. However, the bodies gain incredible regeneration, and Dean wonders how they can be killed, so Lloyd mentions you would need an attack that's strong enough to kill them in one hit. Dean wonders what to name the sword, suggesting they can combine Lloyd and Silpha's names, but Silpha reveals it as the Demon Bane, to make up for her past failure. The demon thinks it's a ridiculous name, revealing that the destruction of the country was a plan to lure out Jade. They stole bodies from the people of Lordis and stirred up a war, causing Jade to return. Rin gets angry hearing this, and she charges at him, but Silpha stops her from getting in the way. The demon prepares to use his ultimate skill, but Silpha takes him out in a single hit. We see Jade in his final moments, as he tells Kazama he won't win. Kazama wonders what he's talking about, but Jade dies and Kazama takes control of his body. He wonders what Jade was doing before he died, looking through his memories, but the memories of his friends stop him from seeing anything, but he doesn't care, since he can now use Jade's power. The sword demon wonders what they should do next, and Kazama thinks about how Jade hated war, so he decides to start one. Back on the bridge, Silpha pays her respects to the man she cut down, thinking he must have been a great swordsman during his life. But there's suddenly an explosion of steam as the river evaporates. We see that it was Lloyd, but we go back to when he was being chased by Kazama. He wonders how to deal with the attacks, noting how the mana spears can break through single barriers, but it's fine as long as he keeps up a reinforced barrier. However, there's also Jade's teleportation ability, so he needs to be constantly moving. He tries to fight back, double casting a spell to create an enormous flaming giant, but Kazama just teleports away, and it ends up evaporating the river. Grim warns him to keep moving, but he notices that Kazama didn't attack with his teleportation, so he realizes it requires line of sight. He decides this is his chance to use his sword, and he suddenly attacks Kazama with countless clones. They all stab him, but he notices the one with the real sword and takes him out. He tells him it's useless since he can regenerate from any attack, but he starts to wonder why the clones aren't disappearing, and he notices the one he killed was just a fake. He wonders where the real body could be, thinking the best place would be to watch from above, but Lloyd suddenly attacks him with fire. The clones quickly shuffle, and Kazama wonders how to deal with them. He decides to attack them all at once, and he starts firing mana spears in all directions. He hits one with a barrier, but it turns out to also be a clone. He realizes Lloyd must have put barriers on a number of the fakes, and thinks Lloyd must be among them, but we see that he actually has no barrier, using a concealment spell to hide himself, while Grim wonders what he's trying to do. We learn that his sword is the spell taker, and it has the ability to absorb spells, which he can then use to increase his mana or analyze the spell. He manages to cut the teleportation, and he's transported to another space where he looks for Jade. He comes across Jade's will, and he finally understands. All the clones crumble, and Lloyd reveals himself. Kazama thinks he's giving up, telling him to join him, but Lloyd calls him boring. He notes how even though humans are weak, they struggle and are able to create incredible things. He mentions how every magic formula comes from their dreams, so it has no limits. Kazama doesn't care, and prepares to finish him off, but Lloyd hits him where he appears. He wonders how he was hit, and Lloyd tells him to bring it on. He tells him not to get cocky, but Lloyd reminds him of what Jade told him in his final moments. Kazama becomes enraged, but Lloyd continues to beat him. He tries to teleport away, but Lloyd is able to follow him, and continues to attack him. Lloyd blasts him with his magic, and he ends up falling towards magma, so he teleports away, but Lloyd still hits him. Lloyd wonders if he's done, so Kazama decides to show him what a demon lord can do, creating an enormous orb of condensed mana. He tells Lloyd it's impossible to stop, preparing to end the fight, but it suddenly vanishes, and Kazama wonders what happened, so Lloyd explains he cancelled it out with an orb of his own. He reveals he already knows the spell, and wondered what would happen if two instances collided, so he tested it out, and they cancelled each other out. Kazama thinks it's not possible, because a single orb requires an insane amount of mana, so he thinks Lloyd is lying. He prepares to steal Lloyd's body, grabbing him from above, but he's instantly overwhelmed by Lloyd's mana. Lloyd creates countless orbs, wondering if Kazama will die if he gets hit, so he tries to run, but still gets hit. Meanwhile, Albert and Dean struggle to see through the steam, but Silpha and Elise take advantage of it. Albert wonders why the sun isn't coming up, as he checks the time, and realizes it should be out, while the others sense something going on above them. We see Kazama being sucked in by an orb, and it's too much damage for him to regenerate, so he tries to abandon his body, but he gets stuck and can't escape. He realizes he's about to die, so he pretends to be Jade, saying that he's back, and telling Lloyd to stop his spell. He calls out to Ren and the others for their help, but Lloyd collides two orbs together and finishes him off. The sky returns to normal, and we see Jade's spirit disappear. Ren thinks back to the past, when Jade told them about the rumors on Lloyd. Galilea thinks he isn't special, but Jade mentions the accident on the day he was born, thinking he used magic right after his birth. Galilea thinks it's a ridiculous story, but Jade thinks that if he's a magic prodigy, he might be able to help them one day. Lloyd makes a grave for Jade, and Grim is surprised he landed the orb since it's a slow spell, but Lloyd notes it was thanks to being able to decipher his teleportation. Grimm thinks he's amazing for doing it in the middle of a battle, but Lloyd notes how the formula was laid out for him, so he knows Jade transcribed the spell in his final moments, and it was Jade who won the fight. Ren listens to him, thinking she needs to tell him how grateful she is, but Albert suddenly appears. He asks about the grave, so Lloyd panics, but he seems to know what's going on after talking to Galilea and the others. He's proud of how strong and kind his brother is, but notes how the Assassin Guild effectively kidnapped him and dragged him into a war, so they need to be punished. They offer to make amends by serving Lloyd for the rest of their lives, so Albert asks if he will accept them, warning him that he will be responsible for their mistakes. Lloyd thinks it's reasonable, and he agrees to take full responsibility. Albert tells him not to do everything alone, and reminds him to ask for help if he ever needs it, because he's his precious little brother. Tao suddenly appears, and she wonders if Lloyd is okay, but she realizes that things are already over, so she quickly runs off. But Albert goes after her, wanting to thank her for her previous help. We see the Assassin Guild being released, happy that Lloyd accepted them, so they plan to do their best to serve him. They all have tea together, and Tao gets nervous since they're royalty, but Albert thanks her and tells her to relax, so she orders Silpha to bring her tea, but Silpha spills it on her, so they start fighting. Albert also tells Galilea and the others to relax, and they decide to have a party for Jade instead of being sad. Talia tells Albert to drink with her, but he turns her down, saying he's still working, so Talia uses her ability on him, sharing her intoxication. But he suddenly asks Galilea why he covered Lloyd with his fluids, and they realize he's an angry drunk. Meanwhile, Silpha and Elise relax in a hot spring, and Silpha wonders what Ren wants, so she asks to be able to work with Lloyd, wanting to show her gratitude. But Silpha notes that it's not something she can decide, telling her to ask Lloyd himself, but he suddenly appears, and tells her that it's fine. We see Ren as she heads to Lloyd's room to call him for breakfast, but she can't find him there. She suddenly hears his voice behind her, so she freaks out, and he comes out of hiding, revealing that he was able to conceal his presence using the mana block she taught him. She's impressed that he can already use it, because it took her a year to learn the skill, so she thinks he's amazing. He notes that it's been a couple of days since she started working there, so he wonders if she's already used to her job, but she explains that she still needs time to adjust. She explains that Silpha has been teaching her, but she's extremely strict, and Rin is struggling to learn proper etiquette, but she promises to do her best. He tells her she can be casual with him when the other servants aren't around, but Silpha suddenly arrives, and scolds Ren for speaking to him so casually. We see civilians fixing the damage caused by the demons, and Lloyd plays on Galilea's webs, telling him they're useful for the reconstruction. We learn that he's now the governor of Lordest, and Lloyd reveals that his father gave him the authority to appoint the governor. So he decided to give Galilea the position, because Lloyd believes that he can make Lordest great again. But they know that it will take time before the repairs are done, because the demons messed the place up. Galilea notes that he won't let the disaster happen again, because he's now the governor, but Talia mentions that they need something to protect themselves from demons. So Grimm tells them he has a demonic opinion, and recommends divine sorcery, but they're surprised that he's actually a demon, because they thought he was just a goat. He explains that divine sorcery is a kind of magic that only church devotees can use, and it uses God's holy power to dispel evil, but Talia and Crow are skeptical, because they don't believe in God. Grimm thinks they should join the church, and tells Lloyd to consider it, but he starts acting strange, so Grimm wonders what happened in the past. Lloyd reveals that he was once a member of the church, and he got kicked out 2 years ago, but he wants to learn divine sorcery, so he decides to join the church again. Lloyd visits the church, and he wonders why Ren decided to join him, so she explains that she had to stand in for Silpha, because she's busy with work. She mentions that she also wants to spend time with him, but she suddenly hugs Shiro, and Babylon asks him if he plans to serve the church to learn divine sorcery. But he explains that he needs to do chores for the church before he can achieve his goal, and Babylon thinks it's a hassle, but Lloyd doesn't seem to care. He greets the pastor, who asks him if he's there to pray, but he suddenly freaks out as he recognizes Lloyd, telling him he won't forget what he did 2 years ago. The pastor calls him a demon spawn, but a girl named Escher is glad to see Lloyd, and the pastor tells her she's too soft. but she reminds him that God will forgive anyone who repents, and notes that her sisters are no longer angry at Lloyd. The pastor mentions that he can't forgive him, but he's amazed by Shiro's cuteness, so he decides to give Lloyd a chance. As he starts hugging Shiro, he tells Lloyd and his friends to complete their tasks, but he immediately gets bored and ends up breaking a vase. Escher is glad that he didn't get hurt, but she realizes that the vase is the pastor's favorite, and she promises to help Lloyd apologize to him. They pick up the pieces together, and he leaves with them, but Ren asks Escher about him, so she reveals that he isn't interested in anything but magic. She knows that he joined the church to learn divine sorcery, but she doesn't seem to care, and notes that he also used to break things in the past. In a flashback, we see Lloyd as he breaks a vase, and Escher is glad that he's okay, but he tells her to be strict with him. So she calls him a bad boy, but he thinks it isn't good enough, telling her to blast him with divine sorcery instead. But she explains that it should only be used to fight evil, and asks him if he wants to sing together, but he just walks away. A demon suddenly appears, so everyone evacuates the church, and we learn that Lloyd is the one who summoned it, because he wants Escher to use divine sorcery to defeat it. She saves him as he's about to get hit, but she ends up getting hurt, so Lloyd starts to feel guilty, and the demon disappears. We return to the present, as Escher reveals that Lloyd confessed what he had done, so everyone started calling him the demon spawn, and he was kicked out of the church. But she knows that he's a good person at heart, because she has spent so much time with him, and she wants to invite him to sing with her. We see Lloyd throwing the trash outside, when he sees his sister Saria, who's being bullied by thugs. They start threatening her, but she asks them if they're good with instruments, and they reveal that they aren't that skilled, so she starts walking away. Babylon asks Lloyd about her, so he reveals that she's a musical prodigy who's a master of all instruments, but music is all she knows, so it's hard to get along with her. One of the thugs mentions that he's good at making girls squeal, but Escher stops him and tells him that Saria isn't an instrument. But he grabs onto her, so she starts screaming, and Saria is impressed by the sound she's making. The pastor notes that the recital will be ruined, but Lloyd wonders what he's talking about. So Babylon explains that Saria and Escher will perform together, and notes that their music is popular because it heals those who listen to it. Grimm thinks it's divine sorcery, and Lloyd doesn't want it to get cancelled, so he tells Ren to deal with the thugs. Saria tells the thugs that they're terrible musicians because they made Escher cry, and they continue to threaten Saria. But Ren uses her mana focus to put everyone to sleep, and Grimm finds her impressive because her spell didn't affect Lloyd. He notes that mana focus allows her to release her mana at a single point, so the technique is more powerful and accurate, and he's glad that she can transmute her poison into a knockout gas thanks to her training. But the thugs get back up, as she realizes that her poison isn't potent enough, so Lloyd uses Jade's technique to teleport them away. But he realizes that he still has much to learn, because he doesn't know where he sent them. After the pastor wakes up, Lloyd explains that his friends took care of the thugs, but Babylon can't stop shaking, because he can't believe that Lloyd used Jade's technique. Saria stares at Lloyd for a few seconds, and she finally remembers his name, but his friends are surprised that she almost forgot who he is. Escher reveals that she only remembers the names of people who are involved with music, and notes that Lloyd can sing, so she asks him to perform during the recital. But Saria thinks he'll ruin their performance because he didn't practice enough, telling him to pay attention to their recital. Grimm notes that they might use divine sorcery with a ritual instead of a mana signature, explaining that the mages create different phenomena using mana signatures. But they can also produce the same results through rituals, which includes singing and dancing. Lloyd and Babylon suddenly get a strange feeling, but they think they're just imagining things, and the pastor gives everyone wine, as Saria and Escher begin their performance. Everyone thinks it's amazing, and Grimm knows that they're using divine sorcery, so he gives Lloyd his sword, and he uses it to absorb a magic particle, allowing him to see its mana signature. He notes that he has never seen anything like it, and thinks the magic particles heal everyone around them, but he asks Grimm if the magic is hurting him. So he explains that Escher doesn't have enough mana to hurt him, revealing that she's the caster, and Lloyd notes that he can't read the mana signature, but he mentions that things are getting interesting. He reveals that he can feel someone staring at him, and notes that it's coming from above, thinking it must be one of God's servants. So he tells his friends he'll be right back, and he teleports away, as he notes that he locked onto the person who's staring at him, but he never expected to take so long to reach his destination. He breaks into another realm and reaches the skies, as Grimm notes that he has no idea where they are. So they look around, and they see an angel named Jiriel on top of a temple, as Lloyd notes that he has found the person who was watching him. But they realize that he's watching Saria and Escher perform, and we learn that he's a huge fan, so he thinks about descending to the human world just to meet them. Lloyd throws clouds at him, so he becomes angry, but he's surprised to see a human in paradise, wondering how he got there, because the Wall of Realms separates paradise from the human world. Lloyd asks Jiriel to teach him divine sorcery, but he thinks Lloyd wants to worship him since he's a sacred being, so he tells him to kneel. Grimm tells Jiriel to just spill the beans, and threatens to tell everyone that he's a pervert who likes Saria and Escher, but he notes that nobody will believe Grimm. He reveals that he can teach divine sorcery, but he'll only give it as a gift to those he deems worthy, telling them to return home if they don't want to be punished. But Lloyd refuses to leave, so Jiriel uses his Luxa spell to summon divine swords, which he sends at Lloyd, but he protects himself with his barrier. Meanwhile, Babylon asks Ren if Lloyd said anything before he left, so she reveals that he sensed someone staring at them. But Babylon notes that he felt something else, and he mentions that he needs to head outside to investigate it. We return to Lloyd, as he deflects Jiriel's swords, and he notes that divine sorcery is interesting, because the swords are as hard as steel. He realizes that his sword can't absorb them, because they're considered physical objects, so he returns it to Grimm. He thinks the Luxa swords are created using mana, and he wants to test how durable they are, so he jumps up and attacks with 4 massive element balls. Jiriel freaks out as he sees them, and he can't believe they were able to crack the Wall of Realms, but Lloyd appears behind him, asking him why he's dodging. He swings at Lloyd, and explains that his Luxa is invincible, but he doesn't want it to be defiled by his basic sorcery, so he decided to dodge his attack. He realizes that Lloyd is missing, and thinks he ran away, but he sees Lloyd behind him, as he notes that he wants to test Luxa's durability. Jiriel is angry that he wants to experiment on Luxa, telling Lloyd he'll dodge all of his attacks, but he uses Jade's technique to surround Jiriel with portals, and attacks him from all sides. Jiriel manages to fly away, and Lloyd thinks he needs to make adjustments, but Grimm recalls how Kazama used that move against Lloyd, realizing it's more dangerous now that he's the one using it. Grimm tells Lloyd that he might end up killing Jiriel, but he tells Grimm not to worry, because he won't misuse Jade's power. He creates a portal to attack Jiriel with his flames, but he flies away, as Grimm tells him to just teach Lloyd divine sorcery. But Jiriel continues to claim that his Luxa is invincible, and tells Lloyd he'll never hit him, because he's too fast. Lloyd realizes that he can't hit Jiriel, because he uses his teleportation spell before his spells activate, so Jiriel has time to react. He mentions that he has seen through Lloyd's tricks, and prepares to attack him, so Grimm starts to panic. But Lloyd decides to use teleportation the moment his spell activates, and Jiriel is about to reach him, but a portal suddenly appears, and Lloyd burns him with his magic. He tries to block with his Luxa, but it shatters because of the flames, and Grimm tells him to surrender. But he refuses to give up, and notes that his Luxa may have shattered, but it's still infinite, so he can repair it as much as he needs to. Lloyd becomes excited hearing this, and wonders how much it can infinitely regenerate, so he decides to test it again. Jiriel is nervous as he sees Lloyd preparing to use his spell, and he promises to let him return safely after he gives him his autograph. But Lloyd surrounds him with portals, so he admits that everything he said was a lie, but Lloyd hits him with all his spells. He wonders why Jiriel's body is now transparent, so Grimm explains that ethereal beings are made of mana, and he realizes that Luxa is neither invincible nor infinite. But he still thinks it's an amazing spell, because it consumes mana to create physical weapons. Jiriel thinks Lloyd just lost his chance to learn divine sorcery, but Lloyd gives him a portion of his mana to revive him, and tells Jiriel to teach him his magic. He realizes that he gave Jiriel too much mana, because he looks bigger than usual, and he finds Lloyd's powers interesting, so he comes up with a plan to steal them. He agrees to teach Lloyd divine sorcery, but notes that they need to form a pact first, and he grabs onto his hands. But we learn that he plans to possess him, so that he can visit the surface, and he looks forward to seeing Saria and Escher. He uses his spell to take over Lloyd's body, and he thinks his plan worked, but he realizes that he turned into Lloyd's hand. Grimm calls him an idiot, and tells him that Lloyd has more mana than him, so he ended up absorbing him into his body. Lloyd asks him if that takes care of their pact, and Jiriel explains that to use divine sorcery, an angel must engrave the mana signature on the caster's soul. He explains that the pathway is usually created through a ritual, but the path is active while he's with Lloyd, so he can use divine sorcery by calling it out with his soul. He decides to give it a try, and tells Grimm he now understands the sorceress language from earlier, saying divine sorcery is incredible. Grimm thinks he has mastered it, so he now has the power to conquer both paradise and the netherworld, but he's disappointed that he was able to learn it so easily, because he enjoys the process of learning. He decides to try the Luxa spell, and Jiriel reveals that its form changes depending on its user, telling Lloyd to try creating a sword. He uses the spell, as Jiriel notes that he can sense his emotions, so he can tell that Lloyd is pure and genuine like an angel, thinking he's just like a certain person who earned his respect from a long time ago. But a giant monster appears, and it starts destroying the Wall of Realms, so Grimm and Jiriel freak out, telling Lloyd to make it stop. But he explains that he isn't finished yet, and Jiriel realizes that Lloyd's Luxa looks different because of his nature and immense mana pool, thinking the monster resembles the wings of an archangel. But Grimm tells him to get a grip, and notes that they need to do something about the monster. We see Babylon as he heads to a garden, and he notes that he can smell something there, realizing he's the only one who noticed it because he has a sharp nose. He decides to look around, because he thinks he can find clues about divine sorcery, but a strange man suddenly asks him if he's lost, and offers to escort him back to the recital. He asks the man who he is, so he reveals that he's a pastor, but Babylon doesn't believe him, because he isn't wearing a rosary. He reveals that he forgot to wear it, and shows Babylon his rosary, but Ren suddenly arrives with Shiro, who becomes agitated when he sees the man. Babylon mentions that his rosary looks strange, because it's too clean for someone who's a longtime member of the church, and the man prepares to take them on. But Lloyd suddenly arrives, and he asks everyone what they're doing there. The man prepares to fight, but Lloyd walks past him, and leaves with his friends, but as Jiriel looks at the man, he seems to recognize him. They return to Escher, who reveals that their performance was called off because of the weather, but Jiriel starts to freak out, because he always wanted to meet his favorite stars. Babylon asks Escher about the garden, so she reveals that it's where they bury dead pets, and he wonders if that's the reason why it smells bad, but he's still worried about the man. Lloyd tells the pastor he's leading the church, and Babylon thinks he shouldn't concern himself any further, because Lloyd already got what he came for. We see the man stepping on his rosary, as he notes that he needs to get it dirtier, because he recently received it after he lost his original one. A creature suddenly comes out of the ground, but he notes that there's no need to pursue the intruders, and thinks they should just increase security, since they can't be interrupted now that the day they're waiting for is at hand. Jiriel teaches Lloyd's friends how to use the Luxa spell, and Lloyd notes that he needs them to help him with his research, so he asks Jiriel to create a path for them so that they don't need to perform rituals. He isn't happy that he needs to teach them Luxa, but Lloyd tells him he stands out because of his appearance, and asks him if he can shrink down like Grimm. So he transforms into a bird, and asks Lloyd what he thinks about his new appearance, but Lloyd completely ignores him. Jiriel reveals that Escher used a purification class divine sorcery, which heals wounds and destroys evil creatures, but the thugs suddenly appear, and they're surprised to see Lloyd. They start threatening him, but we learn that they work for Galilea, who offers to cut his finger to make amends. Talia mentions that the people of Lourdes have no manners, and Crow notes that they follow the strongest, but the thugs wonder why they're nice to Lloyd. They prepare to beat him up, but he uses his glow spell, which causes them to have a change of heart, and they immediately apologize for what happened. They mention that they'll also apologize to Saria and Escher, and Jiriel realizes that the thugs touched them, so he wants to punish them, but Grimm stops him, and he wonders why Ren and Babylon didn't recognize the thugs, so Talia explains that they haven't been spending time with the group. We see Babylon in the church, and everyone's glad that he stayed behind, because his food is amazing. The pastor isn't happy that Lloyd left after a day, and we learn that Jiriel also taught Babylon divine sorcery, but Lloyd told him to take care of everything while he's gone. Lloyd returns home, and Jiriel is glad that he decided to stick with him, because his life is amazing. Another Lloyd suddenly appears, and Jiriel is confused, so Grimm explains that it's a wooden doll, which was created by Lloyd to finish simple tasks for him. He mentions that they should go ghoul hunting, and explains that fighting undead creatures is the best way to test divine sorcery, revealing that he knows where to find them. But Silpha suddenly appears, and he asks her to join him for a ghoul hunt, so she immediately prepares to leave. They head to the Great Dean Bridge, where ghouls are said to be active, but Ren can't believe that they're hiding there, because the area appears to be thriving. Lloyd wonders if Silpha can use her senses to find the ghouls' lair, but she explains that she can't, because the smell of their rotting flesh is hard to distinguish from food waste. Saria and Escher suddenly appear, and they ask Lloyd if he wants to eat pancakes with them, so Grim notes that they still need to hunt down the ghouls. But Lloyd wants to eat pancakes, and he decides to join Saria and Escher, while Grim mentions that it's the first time he has seen Lloyd so excited. He explains that pancakes are so delicious that they taste like magic, and Saria gives him tips on how to eat them, so Grim realizes that they both like the same food. Everyone enjoys the pancakes, and Escher asks Lloyd and Silpha what they're doing in the town, so they explain that they're hunting ghouls. Escher reveals that countless people have taken refuge in the church because they were attacked by ghouls, and she tells Lloyd about the areas where they have been sighted. But she notes that the adventurers who were sent to get rid of them have gone missing, so Lloyd wonders what happened to them. Saria mentions that she doesn't want their recital to be cancelled, and Ren wonders if she'll sing again, so Escher reveals that their performance will be huge, because the king and pope will attend. After that, Ren is determined to get rid of the ghouls, because she doesn't want them to ruin everyone's lives. Silpha mentions that the Great Dean Bridge is the place with the most sightings, and Ren can't imagine the ghouls hiding there, but Lloyd notes that they might be in the sewers. Silpha mentions that the place smells terrible, and Lloyd wants to check it out, because he's worried about the missing adventurers. He reveals that he learned about the ghouls because an adventurer told him about them, and Tao suddenly hugs him, realizing he was worried about her. But Silpha hits her, and explains that he only came to test his divine sorcery on the ghouls, so she's just an extra. He wonders if the ghouls are hiding in the sewers, so she explains that she couldn't find anything, and she ended up getting lost, but she was able to escape after she sensed his presence. She notes that she can't channel Ki in the area, so she considers going home, but Lloyd tells her it shouldn't be a problem, and uses his purification class divine sorcery to get rid of the miasma. They start searching the sewers, as his friends realize that his magic cleaned everything in the area, and Tao mentions that she no longer feels exhausted, but Grim notes that the light is hurting him. Tao realizes that she can channel Ki because the air is clean, so she uses her detection skill to search the area, and she manages to find where the ghouls are hiding. She dresses up as a maid, and leads everyone to the ghouls' hideout, where Shiro starts looking around, but he steps outside Lloyd's spell, and struggles to breathe because of the miasma. But he presses on, and Lloyd thinks he can't smell anything, so he thinks about using his detection skill, but Tao suddenly interrupts him, asking him how he can copy her technique. Silpha hits her again and they start fighting, while Tao wonders why Silpha didn't bring her sword with her, so she explains that she wants to keep it clean. Tao thinks it's the perfect chance to compete with her, but she isn't interested, so Tao notes that the winner of the game gets to go on a date with Lloyd. So Silpha decides to participate, and Ren mentions that she wants to join as well. We see a swarm of ghouls chasing Shiro, and Tao notes that whoever kills the most ghouls wins the game, so the girls prepare to take them on. But Lloyd uses his divine sorcery to create Luxa weapons, because he wants the girls to test them out. Tao jumps into action, and manages to kill 4 ghouls, but Silpha suddenly stops her, and starts stealing her kills. She catches up to Tao's score, and she tells Silpha to stop following her, but she explains that she's just testing her Luxa weapon. She tells Tao that her kills don't count, because she didn't use her Luxa gauntlet, so they start to argue, and they continue to steal kills from each other. They appear to be evenly matched, but Ren is falling behind, since she's just fighting casually, but she realizes that she also wants to go out with Lloyd. So she enchants her weapon with poison to make it stronger, but as she tries to attack a ghoul, her knife suddenly shatters. Lloyd realizes that divine sorcery weakens if it's tampered with, and he thanks her for helping him come up with an idea, as he gives her a new weapon. She thinks it's the same as before, but she uses it to cut a ghoul, which suddenly disintegrates, so she realizes that it was poisoned. Lloyd reveals that he modified his divine sorcery, while Grim notes that the knife isn't poisonous, but it causes the purifying effect to spread after it scratches its target. He realizes that divine sorcery is about to evolve, because Lloyd got his hands on it, and the girls continue to slaughter the ghouls. We see that their scores are tied, and the competition becomes intense as they realize that the ghouls are about to get wiped out, but a monster suddenly appears and sends them flying. We cut to the mysterious man, who is choking the pastor, as he notes that he needs to increase the security in the area. He orders a wraith to take over the pastor's body so that it can move around the church, but Escher panics as she sees them, and she asks the man what he's doing. The girls get back up, and Tao charges in, but the monster extends a string, which causes her legs to stop moving. She wonders why she's sitting down, and he prepares to grab her, but Silpha saves her, so she tries to explain what happened. But Silpha reveals that her arms also feel strange, so Tao realizes that they both have no idea what's happening. The monster extends his string at Lloyd, who manages to grab it, and the monster senses his overwhelming power. The girls launch a surprise attack, but he manages to dodge it, and Lloyd checks out his string, realizing it's a spinal thread. Rin reveals that she also saw the strings, and she mentions that she knows the monster because she has already heard about him. In a flashback, we see Jay telling Ren about the neuron blighted, whose body produces spinal threads, which are made from mana. He explains that when they touch a person's limb, they interfere with the motor nerves, and the blighted can control the affected body part. We learn that he has spinal threads wrapped around his skin, and they have mana signatures for evasion and counterattack, so he can react with incredible speed. He was sent as a biological weapon during the Civil War, and he slaughtered everyone in his path, including his allies. So they tried to take him down, but they couldn't stop him, and he even survived being shot through the heart. So they blew him off a cliff to send him into the sea, where his body sank to the bottom as he continued to struggle the entire time. We return to the present, as the girls see the blighted spinal threads, but Silpha wonders why he's still moving even though he's dead, so Ren notes that it must be because of his automatic reflexes. But Lloyd thinks it isn't the case, and he believes that the blighted isn't a ghoul, because he still seems to have memories about his life. The girls charge in, as Tao notes that they just need to dodge the threads, but they realize that the threads are everywhere, and they end up crashing to the ground. We return to the mysterious man, as the wraith tells him that it wants to possess Escher, because she has a nice body, so he tells the wraith to go for it. It prepares to possess her, but Babylon takes it out and stabs the man's arm, offering to show him the way, since he thinks the man is lost. But he tells Babylon he has nothing to show him, and suddenly transforms his arm. Meanwhile, the girls get back up, and the blighted extends his strings, but the girls dodge all of them, and they're able to close the distance. But he manages to block their attacks, and punches Tao and Ren away. Silpha tries to stab him, so he catches her sword, but she notes that his hands are now occupied. Rin uses her poison butterflies, and Jiriel notes that poison doesn't work on ghouls, but the blighted suddenly gets weaker, as Lloyd notes that she used a neurotoxin. He knows that the spinal threads are connected to the blighted's nervous system, so he loses control over them once he's paralyzed. But Rin notes that they need to finish him off before the paralysis wears off, so Tao starts pummeling him, but she stops as he extends his spinal thread, and she barely manages to dodge it. His threads cut everything in their path, and he extends them to attack her, but she uses her skill to grab onto them and throws him towards Silpha. She prepares to finish him off, as she notes that she'll send him to the other side, where he can finally rest in peace, and she uses her Lion's Roar skill to end the fight. He gets blown away, and Ren thinks they were able to defeat him, but Silpha knows that he's still alive, because he was able to regain his automatic reflexes before she hit him. We see the blighted running away, and he thinks about having fun on the surface before he returns to his master, but Lloyd suddenly blows his leg off. The blighted freaks out as he sees him, and he recalls that he lived a miserable life before he died, so he ended up becoming a wraith. He didn't have the power to possess people with strong bodies, so he thought he could never get revenge on the people who made him suffer. But he met his master, who showed him the body of the monster, and it accepted him without resistance. He asks his master what he wants in exchange, but he just tells the blighted to use the body as he sees fit, so he slaughters the people who made him suffer during his past life. But he doesn't know what to do now that he has achieved his goal, so he returns to his master, who welcomes him home, as he realizes that his master has become the center of his world. We return to the present, as Lloyd uses his Luxa to summon a giant angel, and the blighted can't believe how powerful he is, so he considers running away. But he thinks about his master, realizing Lloyd is a threat to him, so he decides he needs to fight him. He stitches his leg back in place, and he charges in, as he dodges the angel's attacks, but he ends up losing an arm. He notes that he can still fight, and he presses on, as he manages to close the distance, but he slams into Lloyd's barrier, as he realizes that he never stood a chance. But an angel catches him as he falls, and Lloyd is glad that he has finally stopped reacting automatically. He wonders why Lloyd spared him, so he explains that he wants to experiment on him because he finds him interesting. But he's surprised that the Blighted can actually talk, and tells him he should have said something, because Lloyd thinks he did more damage than necessary. He starts asking the Blighted personal questions, telling him he wants to get to know him, and he offers to shake his hand. The Blighted is touched by his actions, and he takes his hand, but he starts crying, as Grim and Jiriel praise him for fighting Lloyd without running away. He realizes that it took courage to fight Lloyd, thinking his past struggles are nothing compared to it, and he never thought he would be able to touch Lloyd's hand, so he feels grateful to him. He recalls that his master gave him a marble that contains the divine spell Luma Maxima, and it will destroy his body if it's shattered. It suddenly activates, and his body instantly crumbles, as the mysterious man realizes that he was defeated. Grim is injured by the spell, so Lloyd heals him, and Jiriel wonders how the Blighted was able to use Luma Maxima, because it's an advanced spell that only a few beings can use. Lloyd hears the Blighted telling him to see to his master, and he takes the sword in the Blighted's head, wondering who he was referring to. Babylon tells Escher to escape with the pastor, and orders her not to call for help, so she carries the pastor away. Babylon hopes she won't drag anyone else into the situation, because he thinks no one will be able to help. But Babylon wonders why he's just staring at the ground, hoping he'll stay that way, so that he can run away after Escher escapes. But the man suddenly attacks with his arm, so he jumps away, as he recalls how Lloyd noticed that the man caught his attention. He explains that he believes in Babylon's instincts, because he lived his life dodging death, so he has a sensitivity to danger. He mentions that it might have nothing to do with sorcery, but Lloyd thinks otherwise, and he touches Babylon's chest, telling him to take care of things while he's gone. Babylon dodges the man's attacks, but he wonders why he isn't afraid, even though he knows that the man is stronger than him. He thinks Lloyd must have given him a buff, and he manages to get behind the man, as he notes that his attacks are useless against him, so he uses his glow spell to try changing the man's heart. But he doesn't have enough mana to do that with a single blast, so he spams the spell, thinking the man won't be able to attack him because he's blinded by the lights. But he's suddenly stabbed through the chest, as he realizes that his scent gave away his position, and he falls to the ground, but we see that he was able to buy time for Escher to escape. He suddenly gets back up, and we learn that he twisted his body thanks to his flexibility to dodge the man's attack. He's also able to twist his muscles to their limits, allowing him to generate an incredible force, but the man is too strong, and his attacks end up doing more damage to himself. He goes all out, attacking with everything he has, but the man just blows him away. He finds Babylon's body interesting, and he suddenly uses his own Luxa to summon countless swords. We see adventurers taking shelter from the rain at the guild, and Escher suddenly arrives with the pastor. The receptionist Katrina asks her if she's okay, and some of the adventurers offer to help, but she remembers Babylon telling her not to call for help, so she tells them that the pastor just slipped in the rain. She tells them to look after him and runs off, thinking she needs to find a way to save Babylon. She begs God for help, even offering her own life, but she ends up falling over. As she falls into despair, Lloyd suddenly appears, and mentions he was on his way to the guild. She suddenly cries for him to save Babylon, but she wonders why she would ask him that. She tells him to forget she said anything, but he suddenly disappears. We see Babylon pierced by the man's swords, and Lloyd realizes he was too late. We see Babylon as he passes on, but he's glad that he was able to save Escher. He sees Jade and wants to get a drink with him, but he suddenly hears Escher singing and realizes it's not his time yet, so he follows the music and ends up waking back up. Everyone is overjoyed that he's awake, but Escher ends up passing out since she was constantly healing him. We learn that it's been 3 days since Lloyd brought Babylon back with him, and he and Jiriel used healing magic on him for over 10 hours, but he tells him to thank Escher, who stayed by his side the whole time. Lloyd asks him what happened at the church, so he tells him about the man, and Jiriel can't believe a monster like him could also use Luxa. Babylon mentions how he tried to change the man's heart with the glow spell, but it had no effect, so Lloyd thinks that the man must believe that he isn't doing anything wrong, because purification magic only affects a guilty conscience. After that, they talk to the pastor and try to figure out what the man was up to, because he mentioned something about increasing security. Lloyd thinks they should go back to check the garden at the church, so they head over and find that the repairs are looking good. He thanks Tao for keeping watch over the church and asks if anything happened, so she mentions that Katrina came by. She suddenly appears, and she seems to be annoyed, revealing that she contacted the church headquarters to give them the description of the man. The Pope asks about the incident, so his assistant mentions how the man used Luxa, but the other priests start to lose it, thinking it's absurd that one of them could be a monster. They wonder who spread the rumor, so the woman tells them about Babylon, but notes that he's a former criminal. The priests think that they can't trust him, and they end up sending a message back that there must be evidence if the church is being accused of something. She notes that the guild can't do anything to help in this situation, but Lloyd thinks that they just need to find the evidence. They start digging up the garden, but the pastor notes that it's a sacred place where they bury their pets, so they can't just dig it up. Lloyd thinks about using Shiro's nose, but he seems to be avoiding them for some reason. Crow uses his cursed speech to ask the crows for help looking, and Saria joins them. She's glad that Escher is safe, but punishes her for ditching their practice. She asks her if she's ready for the recital, but Babylon mentions how she still might be targeted, and it might be better to cancel the recital, so Saria decides to perform on her own. The crows are drawn to a specific tile, and it opens up to reveal a secret passage. Lloyd realizes that the door is made of a special wood that blocks out both mana and ki, so it's why it was never noticed. They all wonder what the smell is, and Crow tells Escher to stay back, but she begs them to let her join them. Babylon notes that she's still in danger, but Talia drags him away. She notes that she became a fan of Escher, and she doesn't want to let the incident get to her. As Escher heads into the passage, she thinks about how she needs to overcome her fear, or else she'll never be able to move forward and sing again. We see that Shiro is also terrified, but he thinks about how brave Escher is, so he also heads down, and they're all shocked as they find a lab filled with all kinds of horrific experiments. Escher is horrified, and Silpha thinks they're in the man's base, but everyone thinks he won't be coming back, since he made a scene in the garden. Rin mentions that one of the experiments looks like the ghouls they fought in the sewers, and Silpha sees that another one has a claw, so Lloyd thinks the man used synthesis to create monsters. He explains that it involves taking the cells of living organisms and cultivating limbs, thinking it must be an attempt to infuse wraiths into people, but Escher can't believe it all happened beneath the church. Silpha realizes that they weren't fighting real ghouls, because they were just creatures that were experimented on, so she thinks they were actually chimeras. Lloyd thinks the man is a terrible person, but he's excited to see what his body looks like, because he thinks it's the culmination of all his studies. Silpha and Galilea want to destroy the lab, and Lloyd isn't happy hearing this, so he tries to convince them to stop. But a creature suddenly attacks them, so Crow uses his cursed speech to protect them, and they realize that the monster is a Lamia. Lloyd tells Crow not to kill her, and she continues to attack them, while Lloyd realizes that she's using an air-class spell, so he tells Galilea to protect everyone with his web. Crow uses his skill to clear a path for him and Ren tries to attack the Lamia, but a barrier pushes her back. Galilea thinks they'll struggle to defeat the Lamia, but Crow uses his recitation loop to break through her barrier, and he takes her down with his cursed speech. Everyone's impressed that he was able to defeat her, and Ren notes that his powers have improved after he learned how to control them. Lloyd mentions that the Lamia is a human, even though half of her is a monster, and everyone can't believe the man experimented on her while she was still alive. Ren wonders what they can do to save her, and Crow prepares to put her out of her misery, but Escher stops him, and tells the Lamia not to be afraid. She hits Escher, but she understands why the Lamia did that, because she knows what it's like to be scared out of her mind. She wonders what she can do to help the Lamia, and she suddenly hears Saria playing the piano, so she sings her song for the Lamia. Everyone can't believe she can still do that, because she sang for 12 hours to heal Babylon, and they realize that she isn't casting divine sorcery, since she's already out of mana. They wonder how she's still standing even though she's exhausted, and her song calms the Lamia down, as she recalls how she always heard the song while she was being experimented on. We learn that it kept her sane while she was suffering, and it even stopped the man during his experiments, so she apologizes for everything she's done, and notes that she's still human. She starts crying, so Escher hugs her, and apologizes for failing to save her even though she was always nearby. After that, Albert learns about the underground lab, and Lloyd realizes that the Lamia forgot her name, thinking it must be a side effect of the experiments done on her. but he thinks she must have been an adventurer, and Galilea notes that it makes sense, because she can use magic. She thinks she can't live a normal life because of her appearance, but Galilea invites her to live with them in Lourdes, where she can live a happy life. She's happy hearing this, but Lloyd asks her about the mysterious man, so she gives him the man's rosary, and notes that he left it in the lab. She explains that she doesn't know him, but he seems to hate gods, and Lloyd gives her the notes from the lab. Escher thinks she must never look at it, but he explains that it might help her return to being a human, and notes that her body is still functioning thanks to complex mana signatures. But he reveals that he doesn't understand them, and thinks she can change her body back after she figures them out. So she accepts the research notes, and tells him she'll do her best to return to normal, but Escher becomes sad and runs away. Galilea and Crow promise to help the Lamia, and they think they should name her, so Lloyd decides to call her Lami. Escher is surprised to see that Saria is still in the church, and she reveals that she's taking a break from her recital practice. But Escher tells her she wants to sing with her, since it's the only thing she's good at, and Saria is glad to hear this, telling her they should make it a big show. After that, Albert notes that the festival must be cancelled, so Escher loses it, but he tells her the mysterious man is still at large, and the girls play with Shiro, but Silpha beats them up, and she wonders what the man was planning to do with his experiments. The girls think he wanted to use them to ruin the festival and kill the Pope, so Albert realizes that they really need to cancel the event, but he knows that it won't make the people happy. Silpha looks for the man's rosary, but she realizes that Shiro is wearing it, so she tries to remove it, while Escher notes that the one she has is made of silver. Babylon mentions that he saw the man wearing a new rosary, and he thinks the man wore it because he lost the one they found, but Silpha mentions that his rosary is solid gold. The pastor notes that only the 11 bishops and pope are allowed to wear them, so Ren wonders if the man is a bishop, and the pastor thinks it's impossible. But Silpha notes that the man can change his form freely, and Babylon recalls that he used divine sorcery without a ritual, which means he had a pass. The pastor is surprised hearing this, and he's convinced that the man is one of the bishops, because they're the only ones who can cast divine sorcery without a ritual. Grimm wonders if it's true, so Jiriel explains that he only gave the pass to the Pope, but he shared it with the bishops, just like Lloyd helped the others use divine sorcery. After that, Albert reveals that the church rejected Babylon's testimony, so they won't cancel the festival, and he thinks the Pope's life is in danger, because the church has been infiltrated. Silpha notes that they have little time left before the festival, and thinks they need to separate the Pope from his bishops, so that they can watch them closely. Albert mentions that it's their only option, but notes that they can't trust the people who don't know about the situation, so they must work together to monitor the bishops and take action. That evening, we see a bishop named Anastasia, as she stops a sister who's carrying a letter from Albert. She explains that it's for the Pope, but Anastasia takes it anyway, and she smiles as she reads it. She heads to a room, where she opens a secret passage, which leads her to the man's hideout. She tells him about the letter she found, revealing that Albert wants to inspect the church's facilities, with the Pope and bishops in separate groups. The man thinks the Lamia gave them intel, and notes that the Blighted's arm is the only thing left of him, because the rest of him turned to dust. But he absorbs the arm, and he gains the Blighted's power, as he notes that nothing can stop him now. We learn that the lab that was destroyed was just a branch, so he still has access to chimeras, and he's ready to execute his plan during the festival. The Pope Gaetan arrives with his bishops for the festival, but Silpha tells him his welcome parade has been cancelled, and the bishops will be guarded by members of their team. The Bishop Gammo is angry that they need to be separated from Gaetan, who explains that it's part of Albert's plan to protect them, since there was a recent attack. Silpha assures them that the team will protect them, and tells them to enter the carriages that will take them to their appointed areas. So everyone prepares to leave, and she approaches Anastasia, telling her she'll be her escort. One of the bishops named Bots mentions that he doesn't need guards, because he can beat up anyone who stands in his way. Another bishop named Dante tells him that men shouldn't run their mouths and should talk with their backs instead. But Bots doesn't understand what he means, so Dante calls him an idiot, and Bots is angry hearing this. Rin tells Dante it's time to leave, and Bots mentions that they aren't done yet, but the bishop Melissa drags him to their carriage. Tao wants to guard someone handsome, but she gets assigned to the two bald bishops named Akamaki and Anamaki, so she's disappointed. The bishop named Zealous recognizes Babylon as the person who reported about the mysterious man dressed as a pastor, and Zealous can't believe he thinks the man is a member of the church. Another bishop named Thor thinks Babylon is insulting them, and Zealous asks him if he has a lead, but he reveals that he doesn't have any. Talia prepares to leave with Gemmo, who asks her what she's holding, so she reveals that it's just a drink to set the tone, and he calls her a fool since she's supposed to protect them. At the church, we see the king with Albert, who notes that Gitan will arrive soon, and the king looks forward to seeing him, since they're old friends. Albert thinks splitting up the bishops is the right move, because the man is probably one of them, so he won't be able to kill the Pope. Gitan's carriage arrives, and the king immediately greets him, telling him he was looking forward to his arrival. As everyone prepares for the event, Albert is worried that something bad might happen, because security is too light, and we learn that weapons aren't allowed in the festival. In a flashback, we see Albert telling the king about the mysterious man, but the king doesn't recognize him, and notes that it's too late to cancel the festival. So Albert will need to wait for it to end before he investigates, but he can tighten security on the day of the event. Back in the present, Albert hopes that nothing bad will happen, so that everyone can enjoy the event and return home safely. We see a group of men looking at Silpha, because they all find her cute, and Anastasia notes that she seems to be getting a lot of attention. She hopes Anastasia isn't working for their enemy, because she seems to be dangerous, and Silpha recalls how Anastasia told her to change her clothes. She mentions that she has nothing else to wear, but Anastasia lifts her skirt, and sees that she's hiding a sword, so Anastasia tells her to remove it, and wear a dress with a shorter skirt. So Silpha knows that she's smart, and prays that she isn't their enemy, but she notes that Silpha seems to be capable even without her sword, so she might struggle to get things done. But she thinks it doesn't matter, because nothing can stop what's about to happen. The ground suddenly starts shaking, and everyone thinks it's part of the performance, but Albert can tell that something's wrong, and a giant creature appears near the church. So they start to panic, while Gitan mentions that the gate to hell has opened, and he reveals that everything's going according to his plan. In a flashback, we see pastors visiting Gitan in his house, and they tell him he's a candidate for Pope, asking him if he's willing to undergo the ritual. He decides to go with them, and they tell him they will bathe him with their Luma Maxima to test if he's worthy to become their next pope. They cast their spells on him, but it has no effect, and he notes that there are no shadows in his soul, so they clap their hands and crown him as their pope. But we learn that he can sense darkness within him, and he thinks it's so evil that even the gods can't destroy it. We return to the present, as Gitan notes that he was hoping to overrun the church with chimeras, but Albert has already destroyed his lab. But he thinks it doesn't matter, because his forces will wash over the country, and we see monsters coming out of a hole in the city. Albert can't believe the Pope is actually the bad guy, and he realizes that he should have protected his father instead of him. Gitan notes that he'll eliminate everyone who follows God's will, because he believes the divine teachings are wrong, and he thinks it's okay to kill and steal as long as the intention is pure. Jiriel suddenly calls him, and Gitan tells him he wants God to descend to Earth, so he went on a rampage, but it still wasn't enough for God to intervene. Jiriel wonders what made him turn evil, but he refuses to answer the question, and takes Albert and the king hostage. The king reveals that when he saw the picture, it reminded him of Gitan's son, asking him if he changed because his son passed away. But he just asks the king if those are his last words, and he prepares to finish him off, as he notes that he'll send the entire royal family to the heavens. But everyone suddenly gets teleported away, and Jiriel mentions that Gitan is about to meet his master, as Lloyd suddenly appears. Gitan recalls that the first time they met, he felt chills as he sensed his power, and he prepares to take him on, as he notes that killing Lloyd will make his descent into darkness complete. We cut to the royal palace, where Dean is surprised to see everyone, and the king wonders what just happened. Albert thinks their enemy disguised himself as Gitan, and the king thinks he's right, so he declares that their enemy has taken the church, ordering his soldiers to defend the civilians. We return to Gitan, as he realizes that Lloyd is hiding his presence by suppressing his mana, and he orders Grim and Jiriel to help the people fighting to protect the city. Jiriel mentions that he wants to fight Gitan, but Lloyd tells him that he's no match, and Grim recalls how Lloyd told him that Gitan is also suppressing his mana. So Grim thinks he must be as powerful as a demon lord, and he tells Lloyd not to do anything stupid during the fight. He promises to be careful, so Grimm leaves with Jiriel, while Gaton tries to stop them with his unholy swords, but Lloyd unleashes a powerful blast of fire, which forces Gaton to defend himself. Lloyd focuses his mana and creates a beam of light, which pierces through Gaton's barriers, but he manages to deflect it. Lloyd suddenly appears behind him and kicks him repeatedly, before summoning divine spears to impale him. The spears take them to the skies, and Grimm and Jiriel are surprised by Lloyd's powers, while he mentions that Gaton has crossed a line. The monsters start going on a rampage, and one of them throws a carriage, which is about to hit a civilian. But Galilea saves him, and he prepares to fight the monsters with Talia, as he notes that everything's going just as Lloyd expected. In a flashback to a few days earlier, we see Lloyd as he volunteers to join the recital, and Albert mentions that it's an odd request, because everyone's discussing how to protect the Pope. But Lloyd tells him everything will be okay, since he can't help with guarding people anyway, and Albert realizes that he has a point, thinking he'll be safe if he stays in the church. Grimm wonders what he's thinking, so he explains that the Pope could be the mastermind, because he has a lot of free time on his hands, and he even has enough money to build the lab. So Lloyd decides to wait for trouble to start in the church, and tells everyone to rest while they still can. Back in the present, Gaton realizes that Lloyd isn't just an ordinary prince, and he uses his unholy swords to break free. Grimm and Jiriel can't believe he's still alive, but Grimm notes that they need to get rid of the chimeras in the town, and Jiriel wonders if Lloyd needs their help. Grimm explains that Gaton might be as powerful as Lloyd, and they need to defeat the chimeras quickly so that they can return to support Lloyd. Gaton mentions that he no longer cares about Jiriel or the king, because he thinks Lloyd is a god, so he can fully descend into darkness by killing him, but Lloyd just tells him to bring it on. Meanwhile, Lloyd's friends listen to the messenger crows, and they realize that the Pope is the mastermind. But Ren thinks the other bishops might be helping him, and she thinks Dante is a chimera, because he has stitches on his face. A monster suddenly appears behind her, but a bishop purifies it, so she thanks him for saving her and asks for his name, but he starts acting creepy. So she knocks him down with her poison punch, but she realizes that she's screwed up, and we learn that she just acted on reflex. Anastasia suddenly attacks Silpha, who grabs a pole to defend herself, and Anastasia notes that she wanted to cut her head off during the chaos. She thinks she doesn't deserve to be a bishop because of her behavior, so she thinks it's time to resign, and Silpha realizes that she was right about her. We return to Galilea's group, as they dodge a mage's fireballs, and they realize that he has an insane amount of mana. He mentions that his name is Grimm, and Gammo can't believe it, because he knows that Grimm is a legendary demon who terrorized a kingdom before he was sealed away. Gammo thinks they're doomed now that the seal has been broken, but Galilea and Talia wonder why he's afraid of Grimm, because he seems to be harmless. We see Crow and Bots running away from monsters, and Crow wonders if the church will be okay. So Bots mentions that they'll be fine since they have Melissa, and he explains that she's amazing, but he's still better than her. But he realizes that Crow isn't listening, since he's busy analyzing the situation, wondering why his messengers at the center of town are behaving strangely. He quickly climbs a building, but he's shocked as he sees something at the center of town, and Bots catches up to him, realizing that there's a double S-rank dragon going on a rampage. He wonders what they should do, but Crow suddenly disappears, and Bots sees that he's about to fight the dragon. He recalls how Dante told him that men should talk with their backs, and Bots finally understands what he means. So he takes out his weapon and charges at the dragon, as he declares that he's taking another step towards becoming a great bishop. Meanwhile, Tao charges at a chimera, but he grabs her and smashes her to the ground, and he thinks she's dead, because his Rakugan fighting style was made to kill his opponents in one hit. The bald bishops freak out, and they ask Tao if she's okay, but the chimera threatens to kill them, so they prepare to fight. But she suddenly gets back up, and the chimera wonders how she survived, but he realizes he's missing a hand, and she reveals that she used it to break her fall. She recognizes Rakugan as a martial arts style that vanished in a single generation, because the founder Chakra couldn't find any disciples. She realizes that Chakra's soul must be inside the chimera's body, and he tells her he perfected his martial arts after he gained his new body, since he now has 6 arms. She wonders why he wants to be strong, and explains that she's been training extremely hard, because she wants to be popular. So he realizes that she's insane, but she tells him he's even worse, because he ruined his appearance just to get stronger. She removes her hair ties and tells him she won't lose to him because he has cast aside his humanity. He sees her stance and recognizes it as the 100 Flower Fists because he fought someone who used that style before. We see Chakra after he lost to the master of the 100 Flower Fists, who told him not to give up and let a single loss discourage him. But he's too logical for that, so he decided to abandon his humanity to gain superhuman abilities, and he doesn't regret his decision to this day. He realizes that Tao is preparing to charge straight at him again, and he thinks she's an idiot because he will just slam her to the ground. He prepares to grab her, but she charges up her power and rushes forward with incredible speed. And Chakra recalls how he begged people to become his disciples, but they refused to follow him since he lost to the master of the 100 Flower Fists. They told him to give up his school, and he realized that it was all over for Rakugan, so he decided to take his own life. He died with anger in his heart, and he turned into a wraith, but Gitan invited him to join his group and promised to give him a new body. Tao delivers a devastating blow, which forces Chakra's consciousness back into the present, and she continues beating him up as he realizes that he's still no match for the 100 Flower Fists. She manages to defeat him, so the bald bishops celebrate, but they realize that it wasn't an easy victory because she had to tear his limbs off as she fought him. They think she's amazing because she defeated a monster who abandoned his humanity to get stronger, and Chakra asks her what she thinks about his Rakugan. So she tells him his skills were impressive, and she knows that he's still trying to throw her, telling him he's amazing since he never gave up. He cries hearing this, and as his body crumbles, he realizes that all he wanted was for someone to praise him. The mage continues to attack Galilea's group, and Talia realizes that her powers don't work on the chimeras, so Galilea wonders how they can defeat them. He tells the bishops to keep the church safe, while Talia backs him up with her divine sorcery, planning to restrain the chimeras with his web. But the mage tells him it won't work, because he's the legendary Grimm, and Talia tells him to stop pretending, since they know he's an imposter. But Galilea thinks the Grimm they know might actually be the imposter, because he's so cute and harmless, and Talia thinks that he may be right. The mage prepares to attack them again, but a mysterious voice suddenly kicks his head off, and the mage realizes that he's the real Grimm. He fires a huge beam to obliterate the chimeras, and everyone's shocked by his powers, but he's disappointed that the wraith isn't even a demon. He tells Galilea to purify him, and as he flies away, Talia asks the wraith who he is, so he reveals that he's just a mage who likes Grimm. She realizes that he lied to them, so she immediately purifies him, and they wonder if the boy is the real Grimm. Gitan clashes with Lloyd, and he's excited since he can't see Lloyd's limits, but he thinks he has the advantage because of his powers. Zealous tries to cut a pig's head off, but he realizes that its skin is too tough, so Thor and Babylon help him out. But it immediately regenerates, and they realize that they can't defeat it, because it keeps regrowing its body no matter what they do, and it becomes tougher the more they kill it. It reveals that it's a farm orc, but it doesn't know how its body works, so Babylon realizes that it isn't a chimera. It punches him away, and sends him crashing through the houses, as he wonders why he keeps getting beaten up. It prepares to finish him off, but he wonders why it hates humans, because he wants to understand how it feels. Thor wants to hear its story, because he thinks they can guide it to the right path, so it decides to tell them everything. In a flashback, we learn that the pig was created by an alchemist, and he calls it a masterpiece, because its meat will never run out. He cuts it into pieces, but its body regenerates, and he realizes that it's even bigger than before. He thinks it will solve world hunger, and decides to call it Mega Meat, so it's happy that it can help people. But when the alchemist tastes its meat, he finds it terrible, so he thinks nobody will eat it. Mega Meat is angry hearing this, so he burns the lab and runs away, and he makes people taste his meat every night. But they all throw up because he tastes terrible. He falls into despair, because he was born to become food, but he tastes so bad that even maggots won't eat him. Gitan sees him crying, and he uses his hand to eat his meat, and he thinks it's wonderful, because he can feel its regenerating property, but he notes that it tastes weird. He tells Mega Meat that his ability isn't for humans, so he suggests using it to make them suffer, explaining that they deserve it because they treated him as livestock. Back in the present, Mega Meat mentions that he'll have his revenge, because the humans condemned him as inedible. But Babylon recalls how he starved with his guildmates, since they could barely afford food. He mentions that he would have embraced Mega Meat if he had met him earlier, and he thinks Babylon won't like him after he tastes him, but he promises to turn him into a delicious pork dish. Babylon prepares to cook his meat, but Zealous is nervous because it has a purple aura, and Thor notes that they have no choice but to eat it. Babylon realizes that it's as hard as steel, and Mega Meat thinks he'll fail since it's too tough, but when he touches it, it suddenly becomes softer. He apologizes for attacking it, so it wraps itself with breading, and Mega Meat can't believe it's allowing him to cook it. He prepares to fry it, but Mega Meat thinks he's about to run into another problem, because it has an overwhelming stench, so he thinks it will fill the building with a foul smell. But Babylon manages to fry it without running into issues, and he serves the food to the bishops, telling them it's called a pork cutlet. They admit that it looks tasty, but Mega Meat tells them to give it a try, and he promises to change his ways if they don't throw up after they eat it. He thinks Babylon just locked the stench inside a thick batter, and the bishops are nervous that they might throw up, but they decide to take a bite anyway. They're amazed by how delicious it tastes, and they suddenly imagine themselves having fun as they enjoy its juicy flavor. They mention that it tastes amazing, and Mega Meat can't believe it, thinking they must be lying, but they tell him it's really good, and they can't get enough of it. He asks Babylon about the trick he used, so he reveals that he purified the meat before he cooked it, and he knows that Mega Meat is a good person, since he just wanted to help people. But everyone rejected him, and it caused scum to build in him as he fell into despair. Babylon makes everyone taste his meat, and they all find it delicious, so Mega Meat starts crying, as he realizes that he has finally been accepted. A girl thanks him for the food, and he tells her to share it with the people in the shelter, but Zealous wants to use his meat to gain worshippers, so he decides to adopt him. But Mega Meat tells Babylon to purify him, and Zealous explains that he'll lose his power to regenerate, because it comes from his anger and hatred. But he mentions that it's okay if he turns into an ordinary pig, because he wants Babylon to eat the best part of him after he dies. Babylon uses his purification spell to turn him back to normal, as Mega Meat notes that he wants to fill the stomach of the person who understood him. He turns into a cute little pig, and prepares to jump into the fireplace, but Babylon stops him, because he can't bring himself to eat him. Meanwhile, Silpha blocks Anastasia's attacks, and she manages to push her back. Anastasia is impressed that Silpha can protect herself with just a candlestick, but notes that she's nothing compared to her master, and Silpha wants to learn about him. Anastasia knows about her reputation as an adventurer, and asks her why she decided to quit just to become a maid, so she reveals that it's because she met the person she wants to be with. Anastasia is surprised to hear this, but she realizes that they're both fighting for their masters, and she uses her divine sorcery to create an illusion. Silpha realizes that she's surrounded by giants, and she thinks they aren't real, but they suddenly start attacking her, so she uses her candlestick to defend herself. She struggles to block their attacks, but we see that she has an amulet, and she plans to make her move when Anastasia lets her guard down. She watches Silpha as she dodges the giant's attacks, and realizes that she's noble and beautiful, but Anastasia notes that she's the complete opposite, because she's ugly and filthy. She recalls how her master told her to leave if she didn't want to follow him, but she decided to stay with him, and she realizes that Silpha's candlestick is now broken. So she prepares to finish her off, but Silpha suddenly uses her amulet to summon a Luxa sword, which she uses to overwhelm Anastasia. She uses her sword skill to finish her off, but her Luxa disappears, and Anastasia wonders why she spared her life, because she knows that Silpha made her sword dull to avoid killing her. She reveals that Lloyd gave her a marble, which she can use to materialize her Luxa, because he knew that the church would take away her sword. She mentions that her master is wise and heroic, but she scolds him at times, because he often makes mistakes. She adds that he also has secrets, and she'll wait for him to reveal all of them when he's ready, but she realizes that she's already out of mana, and she can't believe creating a Luxa sword drained all of it. Anastasia notes that she could never bring herself to reprimand her master, and she thinks he wants someone to stop him, but she knows that her voice would never reach him. She mentions that his heart is filled with darkness because of something that happened to him in the past, but she can't do anything to help him. Silpha tells her she has no right to judge her, but Anastasia hopes that through this battle, a voice will be able to reach his heart. We see Escher and Saria riding Shiro, who takes them to the piano, and they see that the city is on fire, so Saria tells Escher to prepare for their performance. The dragon continues its rampage, and Bots protects Crow, telling him to stop using his powers since it's taking a toll on his body. But he realizes that a boy is about to get crushed, so he uses his cursed speech to stop the dragon, and Bots manages to save the boy. But Crow reaches his limit, and Bots tries to talk to him, but he doesn't respond. We see Dante smoking during the battle, and Ren wonders if he's a bad guy, but the bishop she poisoned tells her he needs help, so she drags him to the side. Dante asks her if she knows who's responsible for the mess, and she doesn't know how to answer the question, but she decides to trust him anyway, and tells him that Gaton is behind everything. We return to Lloyd, as he blocks Gaton's sword with his barrier, and he realizes that Gaton uses purifying type sorcery to attack. He sees the symbols on Gaton's swords, and as he flies away to dodge them, he realizes that Gaton is specifying what he wants them to purify. He launches a fireball, so Gaton modifies one of his swords, and uses it to purify the fireball. Lloyd notes that the symbol on Gaton's swords indicates what they purify, but it takes a few seconds to change the symbol, and he needs to be specific about the magic he wants to purify. Lloyd also notices that he can only use 3 symbols at once, but he finds Gaton interesting, since he can change the mana signatures of the gods. Bots tells the boy to run to the shelter, where his mother is waiting for him, and the dragon tries to crush Crow, but Bots saves him just in time. He tells Crow that the civilians have been evacuated, and we learn that he used his powers to save them, even though he was in terrible condition. Bots realizes that the dragon is laughing at them, and he summons his divine weapon to fight it, but it just punches him away. He's angry that it's laughing at everything Crow has been through, but he struggles to get back up, and the dragon is about to take Crow, but Tao and Silpha suddenly arrive to save him. The bald bishops rush to his side, and they try to heal him, but they tell Bots that he's already dead. The dragon prepares to blast the girls with its energy breath, but they attack it with their skills, and it ends up missing them. Silpha realizes that Tao's hand is injured, but she mentions that she'll be fine, and notes that they must defeat the dragon to save everyone. In a flashback, we learn that when the dragon was born, it immediately realized that it was a slave to Kazama, so it thought its only purpose was to serve him. It stayed loyal to him and helped him reach Lourdes, but when Kazama finally obtained Jade's body, he told the dragon that he no longer needed it and ended up getting rid of it. But as it was about to meet its end, Gaton stumbled upon its body, and Anastasia notes that there's a demon lord within Lourdes. She thinks Gaton can defeat it with his divine sorcery, and the dragon wonders why they aren't afraid, since they're in Kazama's territory. Gaton notes that it's impossible to purify the demon lord's heart, since the hearts of monsters aren't tainted, and they mean no harm when they do something evil. He approaches the dragon, who realizes that he's its new master, and he turns it into a chimera, telling it to use its body to find its true nature. It realizes that over half of its body has been replaced with different parts, but its consciousness is still intact, and Gaton tells it to join him if it has nowhere else to go. He mentions that he's preparing for a grand event, but notes that he's also lost, since he doesn't know what to do after he achieves his goal. We return to the present, as the dragon notes that it's starting to understand its true nature, and it uses its giant arm to attack Tao. Silpha realizes that it's about to finish her off, so she uses her sword skill to cut its hand, but it smashes her to the ground, as it notes that it's starting to have fun. It observes Bots as he begs the bald bishops to save Crow, and notes that it's having fun because of their expressions, but they realize that it's about to destroy the shelter. So everyone starts to panic, and Tao and Bots try to stop it, but it easily knocks them down, and the people in the shelter realize that they're about to die. Bots screams for help, even if it's from a devil, and Grimm suddenly punches it away. Everyone's surprised to see him, and Jiriel approaches the bishops, telling Grimm he'll focus on healing Crow. The dragon freaks out as he sees Grimm, but the girls wonder who he is, so he introduces himself as a wandering adventurer. They mention that his horns look weird, so he explains that they're just accessories, and we learn that Jiriel told him to disguise himself as a human, since he might get mistaken for a monster. The dragon tries to grab him, but he easily breaks its hand, and tells everyone Crow will be fine, since Jiriel is healing him. He explains that he won't let Crow die, and Grimm asks Tao if there are still civilians in the area, so she reveals that they've already been evacuated. Grimm starts attacking the dragon, and he mocks it as he beats it up. He mentions that he heard it laughing while it attacked his friends, and he knows that a black dragon can't reach the human realm alone, so he thinks it was abandoned by its master. But he notes that he doesn't feel sorry for it, since the weak perish in the netherworld, and he caused chaos in the city. He mentions that the dragon is so pathetic that he doesn't feel like killing it, and he tells it to run away, but it refuses to back down and prepares to attack him with its energy breath. So he prepares to use his skill, as the dragon notes that he's kind, since it knows that he's still giving it a chance to escape. But it doesn't want to turn back, because it wants to die as a dragon, and it unleashes its energy breath, so Grimm uses his Arctis Obscura to overpower it. As the dragon turns to dust, it recalls that Gitan gave his chimeras a sphere with Luma Maxima, and told them to use it if they wanted to pass on. He explains that using it isn't a form of betrayal, since he doesn't even consider them as his comrades. But the dragon decides not to use it, and it's grateful that Gitan gave it a chance to die fighting. Grimm consumes the dragon, and notes that he was able to get stronger by absorbing its mana, but thinks he still isn't strong enough to defeat a demon lord. Jiriel joins him, and notes that he was able to save Crow, but he's so exhausted that he can barely move. Grimm thinks the people should be safe now, and notes that they should go above the clouds to join Lloyd, so they can help him against Gitan. Gitan sees the Arctis Obscura, and he realizes that his chimeras have been defeated, but he uses his skill called the 10 Commandments, which drops eggs into the city. One of them lands in the shelter, and an S-rank chimera appears, so everyone starts to panic, while Gitan mentions that all of his chimeras are just as powerful. Lloyd thinks about using his teleportation spell to take them out, but Gitan starts attacking him relentlessly, since he knows that Lloyd can't use his magic if he can't focus. One of the chimeras knocks Galilea down, and it removes his web, allowing the monsters to enter the city. Talia realizes that the chimera is stronger than the one they defeated, and Galilea suggests retreating, since he thinks they can't defeat it. The people in the shelter run to the door, and they beg the guards to open it, so Katrina explains that they can't leave, since there are still monsters outside. But one of them explains that they can't stay there, since the chimera will slaughter them if they don't do anything, and it prepares to attack her from behind. The injured adventurers save her, and tell her to escape while they hold it back, but everyone starts to wonder if God has abandoned them. Gitan continues to attack Lloyd, who still can't use his teleportation spell, and Gitan mentions that he doesn't believe in God, asking Lloyd if he thinks he's worthy of that title. Lloyd's friends prepare to fight the chimeras, but we see that they're already exhausted, and a chimera approaches Anastasia, who thinks she's about to meet her end. Gitan reveals that his goal is to conquer the country and change its religion, since everyone believes in a god that doesn't exist, but he notes that it's impossible to achieve his goal without a few sacrifices. Escher and Sirius suddenly start performing, and we learn that Escher's divine sorcery increases the range of their music so that it can reach everyone in the city. The spell doesn't have the power to affect anyone who hears it, but Escher's voice helps the people calm down, and the chimeras are stunned as they listen to it. Gitan stops as he remembers his past, and Lloyd realizes that it's his chance to attack, so he uses his teleportation spell to eliminate the chimeras. He mentions that he doesn't care about Gitan's past, since his magic is the only thing he's interested in, and he notes that he wants to capture him alive. He shows Gitan the chimera's heads, and notes that he'll never understand the depths of sorcery, telling him it's time for the final round. Dante tells Ren that the situation has changed, but he thinks the song is dangerous since the chimera's heads exploded when it started playing. He mentions that he knows the person responsible for the mess, so he wants to kill all of the monsters, but a chimera suddenly attacks him, so he uses his divine sorcery to cut it into pieces. He notes that he'll look for Escher, but Ren decides to go with him, and she wonders why he started butchering the chimeras after he learned about Gitan. He knows that she's been looking after the civilians, and tells her she's more useful than the bishop she's carrying, so he mentions that she should join the clergy. She tells him she isn't interested, but he reveals that he likes people with secrets, since a touch of darkness is what makes them human. As he walks away, she suddenly realizes that he's just like Jade, and he's determined to stop Gitan, thinking he should have sensed the darkness in him before he became the Pope. In a flashback, we learn that Gitan had a happy life with his family, and he used to sing for his son, who enjoyed listening to him, even though his voice was terrible. He started singing in the church, where he casts divine sorcery on the faithful, but Jiriel suddenly talks to him, and tells him he hates listening to his voice. But Jiriel knows that there are people that rely on him, so he decides to give Gitan a pass, telling him he can now use divine sorcery without a ritual. After he becomes a bishop, he meets a thug who wants to test him, and he challenges Gitan to purify him. But he uses his Luxa to teach the thug a lesson, and tells him not to rely on purification, since he can still overcome the darkness inside him. The thug turns out to be Dante, and he starts dressing up like Gitan after the incident, since he wants to be just like him, and they end up becoming best friends. Gitan doesn't agree with the king's ideas, so they argue about political issues, but they both decide to do their best for their country. Gitan finds Anastasia outside his house, and he notices that she's malnourished, so he invites her to eat inside. But when they enter his home, she mentions that her father told her to wait outside, and he realizes that his family has been killed. He sees a man eating the food in his house, and he starts to feel hatred, wondering why God didn't do anything to protect his family. He begins to question why he's serving him, and he finally finds the resolve to purify the man, but he doesn't do anything to repent and continues to eat the food in the house. Gitan continues to use his glow spell, but the man suddenly starves to death, and he realizes that the man's actions were pure, since he only killed so he could feed himself. Gitan starts to question his faith, and he wonders if the people who are pure of heart are actually monsters, since purity of intent is enough to excuse anything. His friends talk to him after the incident, and he tells them he's completely fine since he has faith in God, but he only says that because he's a pastor, and his response actually makes himself sick. Everyone starts calling him a saint, and the priests purify him before he becomes pope, but it doesn't purge the darkness inside him. So he thinks he isn't evil, and he plans to change the country's religion, since he believes that it's the right thing to do. We return to the present, as Lloyd mentions that he's had enough of Gitan's story, since it's so depressing that it made everything black and white. Gitan thinks Lloyd doesn't want to hear his story since he's a god, and he wonders if gods don't listen to reason, but Lloyd suddenly smashes his head. The people enjoy listening to Escher's performance, and Thor thinks it made the Chimera's heads explode, but Babylon knows that Lloyd was behind it. He can hear static as he listens to the song, so he realizes that Escher is pushing herself, and he hopes that she doesn't mess up, since her song is keeping the people's spirits intact. We see chimeras trying to stop Escher, but Shiro tears them to shreds, and she hopes that a rainbow will shine when the battle is over. Gitan screams in pain, while Lloyd listens to the song, thinking Escher and Saria are doing a great job. He mentions that he wanted to show Gitan something, but he suddenly cuts his arm off. Lloyd tells Gitan to listen to the music, and his other arm suddenly explodes, so he wonders if Lloyd is using his teleportation, but he knows that it's impossible, since there's usually a delay when Lloyd uses that technique. He explains that he's using concealment and full sprint, so his magic is invisible and extremely fast, and he blasts Gitan with his ice and fire magic. He realizes that he can't react in time, so he uses the Blighted's automatic defense threads, and he manages to dodge an explosion. But Lloyd suddenly appears above him with a meteor, and he barely manages to block it, as he realizes that Lloyd can launch multiple attacks at once. He tries to improve his focus, but Escher's voice distracts him, and Lloyd suddenly stabs him with his 7 goddesses. Gitan wonders how his spinal threads were destroyed before he could even react, and he doesn't know what kind of magic Lloyd is using, realizing his sorcery is on another level. He recalls how Gitan mentioned that divine sorcery can never change his heart, and Lloyd wants to test if it's true, so he creates a massive circle of light and blasts Gitan with his glow spell. But he blocks the attack, and Lloyd realizes that he used anti-divine symbols, but he knows that Gitan can only use 3 symbols at a time, so he thinks he can break through his defenses. Grim and Jiriel tell him not to show mercy, but he doesn't listen to them, and he just absorbs them into his hands. Gitan notes that there are noises in the song, since his chimeras are attacking Escher, but Lloyd mentions that he already knows that, and Gitan is surprised that he isn't worried about her. We see Shiro as he gets overwhelmed by the chimeras, but Saria tells him to join their song, and the chimeras get pushed back as he howls. The noise disappears, and Lloyd mentions that he wants to try a spell, which makes Gitan freak out, as he realizes that Lloyd is planning to use 3 elements at once. He's worried that if he uses his symbols to block the elements, he might get hit by a cleansing spell, but he realizes that he doesn't have a choice. So he prepares his symbols, and the clouds freeze as Lloyd uses his triple incantation, which summons a massive blast of ice. It clashes with Gitan's symbols, and he struggles to defend himself, but he notes that Lloyd is insane, since his spell is so powerful that it could destroy the whole world. We see that Lloyd's spell created an ice storm, and everyone in the city starts to panic, thinking their god must be angry. Shiro realizes that the chimeras are about to reach Escher, but Anastasia and Dante suddenly arrive, and they cut down the chimeras. Rin is glad that Shiro is okay, and Anastasia wonders who Gitan is fighting, so Dante notes that it must be God, since the power is overwhelming. We return to Gitan, as he thinks about all the evil things that he has done, and he wonders why God hasn't judged him yet. He suddenly sees his son, who asks his mother if he can sing with him, and he starts crying, as he recalls how happy he used to be with his family. He notes that he's a terrible singer, but his son tells him it doesn't matter, and he jumps to hug him. But Gitan suddenly realizes that Lloyd is about to attack him, so he blasts Lloyd with his Luma Maxima, but he blocks it while he's smiling, and counters using the same spell. It pierces through the clouds, and it rains down to the city, which makes everyone happy, as they realize that it's healing their wounds. Dante wonders what happened, and Anastasia remembers how Gitan told her that rain follows him anywhere he goes, thinking it's because heaven hates him. She starts crying, since she didn't do anything to help him, and Dante notes that he hates cleansing spells, because they make people spill their hearts. Everyone's hearts are purified thanks to Lloyd's spell, but he wonders if it worked on Gitan, since he didn't change at all. Lloyd knows that he could have turned the bishops into his pawns, and he wonders why Gitan didn't do that, so he explains that he wanted them to judge him in the name of God. He notes that he wanted to fight them during the festival, but he never expected Lloyd and Escher to stop him, thinking God must live in Escher's singing voice. But Lloyd tells him why she decided to become a sister, revealing that it's because she loves singing in front of everyone, and Gitan can't believe it has nothing to do with God. Lloyd gives him the blighted sword, telling him he picked it up, and he mentions that he'll be waiting for him in Lourdes. After that, everyone hears the news that Gitan was murdered, and the culprit disguised himself as the Pope, so that he could infiltrate the festival and cause chaos. Albert believes the news, wondering if the man behind the incident hates God, but Zealous is angry, since he knows that Gitan is the culprit. Thor tells him to calm down, since the other bishops still don't know the truth, and Dante explains that the church's reputation is at stake, saying the country might fall if the people start to doubt them. Zealous notes that they need a new leader who can guide the people, and thinks he should be the next pope, but Dante tells him that they've already found the perfect person for the job. Gammo tells Escher to become the next pope, and she thinks there must be a mistake, but he tells her to take the trial, so she completely loses it. We see Saria playing the piano, but she realizes that Lloyd is in her room, and he apologizes for disturbing her. But she reminds him how he predicted everything, and told her to perform with Escher to turn the tide of the battle. He mentions that he enjoyed their performance, and she knows that they're both weirdos obsessed with their passion, so she tells him he also did well. She starts playing the piano again, and he realizes that she's recreating his spell through her music, so he becomes nervous, since he doesn't want her to find out that he fought Gitan. He explains that he never left his hiding spot, so he doesn't know what happened, but she thinks they both had fun at the festival. Lloyd goes back to reading, while she continues to play the piano, as she notes that she enjoys the moments when they don't disturb each other. After that, we see everyone in Lourdes, where Jiriel is excited to see the girls in the hot spring, but Grimm stops him, and Galilea explains that only Lloyd is allowed in the mixed bath. Escher mentions that she isn't ready to become the next pope, and Lloyd suddenly appears, so Ren and Tao wonder what he's doing there, but Escher asks him what she should do, since she doesn't want to become the pope. But he doesn't seem to care, so she threatens to nominate him as the next pope, and Silpha is against it, since she wants him to stay at the palace. Saria thinks Escher is perfect for the role, and she reminds her about her passion for singing, thinking her song will be able to ring throughout the world after she becomes pope. Escher realizes that Saria is right, so she decides to accept the position, and we see her singing in front of everyone as the new pope. Lami and Gitan bury the Blighted's remains, while the people enjoy the performance, and we see Anastasia watching them from a distance, as Lloyd realizes that everyone was able to have a happy ending. But that's where this video ends. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.